Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Fanfic Universe, and today we've got an exciting what if scenario for you. What if Naruto had godlike Sharingan power? This one's going to be a wild ride. But before we dive into the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy fanfiction like this. And of course, share it with your friends to spread the love for these epic crossovers. Alright, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into the story. Demonic-looking seals were carved into it. In their time, those seals had represented an impassable barrier to all but the most knowledgeable of souls, and had kept this tomb tightly locked beneath the earth for generations. Apparently, the man, or demon, that had sealed it intended for it to be found only after several eons had passed, if at all. And it seemed that for some time now, his wishes had been granted. However, the stone upon which the carvings were made was not entirely proof against time, and erosion had sapped the carvings of much of their coherency. Without their original perfection, their forbidding power had begun to fade away. The door was no longer the impenetrable locked gate that it had been made to be. In those old, frayed seals that used to project insurmountable solidity, Orochimaru saw a weakness, and with it, an opportunity. The snake Sannin knew that mortals did not lock up and hide away things in such a manner that were small, trivial, or worthless. Only the worst criminals, the most sacred treasures, and the most terrible powers imaginable received such sheltering, solid tombs. The nature of the demonic seals that locked it also said much, for only two kinds of entity knew how to write them: demons, and those whose job or hobby it was to seal demons. Whatever was kept in this old tomb, Orochimaru knew, had to be something either immensely precious or immensely powerful, and Orochimaru was not one to refuse a chance to obtain power. His grin remained plastered to his pale, menacing face as he moved forward to shatter the seals. They did not hold for long against the legendary snake Sannin, and within moments, the door to the tomb was open, its contents exposed for Orochimaru to behold and master. He braced himself against possible attack. He still did not know whether or not the seals were the tomb's only defense, or if the contents themselves were in any way dangerous. When no attack came, however, Orochimaru's grin widened, and he stepped into the cold, dark, stone-walled chamber, eager for a power he could seize. For a long time, the blind man lay in cold and darkness. Then, rather suddenly, the door to his prison was heaved open. Moments later, the ice which had bound his form for a time that he failed to measure was shattered, and he felt his body crash to the stone floor amid melting shards. For several minutes, the man with no eyes failed to move, but the faint warmth from the torches carried by the men standing in the tomb slowly seeped into the room and thawed his stiff muscles. After a silence that lasted half of an eternity, he was able to rise to his feet. "So," drawled a voice from the door, "what is it that I've unearthed here, in this demon-sealed tomb?" The blind one flinched. He could tell after the first word that the owner of this voice was not at all a pleasant person. As it continued its questioning, he almost felt the cold of his imprisonment return to him, despite the heat of the torches. "Strange," it went on, "it doesn't seem to be anything worth my time. Are you a demon? A Jinchuriki, perhaps? The creator of a jutsu to defy the ravages of time? Or are you simply an eyeless, frozen human who has yet to surrender to death?" The prisoner tried to find his voice to respond, but to no avail. His larynx was a solid block of frozen human tissue. All he could produce was a frosty breath of air, at which the questioning voice took on a disinterested tone. "Well, that is quite the shame," it said. "I had hoped for something that I might make great use of. Unfortunately, it seems as though all of my efforts to dig you out have yielded me nothing of true value." The owner of the voice approached the blind man, leaning down until he was practically breathing in the blind man's ear. The blind one shuddered involuntarily, more from fearful discomfort rather than the cold. Some part of his newly thawed brain was telling him that his frailty resulting from being frozen for countless years was about to earn him a very unpleasant welcome back to life party. "But, no matter. I am always in need of new test subjects, and you ought to do well. You know, I've always wondered if the human body can feel more pain when they aren't distracted by their vision." Although he had no eyes to see, the prisoner was certain that the owner of that malefic voice was smiling. Although pain had become the staple of the blind man's diet by this point, he still did not appreciate how much more difficult his escape was because of it. It was bad enough trying to scramble over rocks, climb trees, wade through rapids, and find food without being able to see. Add to that a massive headache, unstaunched blood loss, both internal and external, a complete lack of any sense of direction or location, horrific emaciation, and generally excruciating pain accompanying every movement, and he was in a state that was more than a little sad. Yet, he continued, because the alternative was to be recaptured and taken back to that hell, where pain that was several thousand times worse awaited him. While he had no idea where he was going, he was sure that it had to be better than what he had left behind. At least, that's what he hoped. Damn you, he gasped out, stopping momentarily to cough up blood. I swear, if the rest of the world is even a fraction of what that hell was, I will murder you, you sadistic beast. Blind or not. A 7-year-old boy sat in his favorite swing outside the Ninja Academy in Konohagakure, pondering, not for the first time, his abnormal existence. Normally on a bright, warm summer day like this, his after-class activities involved the pulling of pranks, eating clean through the Ichiraku ramen bar's storerooms, or working on learning new, sometimes perverted to annoy Iruka-sensei, variations of ninjutsu to impress Sakura-chan and show the world just how great he was. But this was not a normal day for the blonde ninja in training. This was one of those days when young Uzumaki Naruto spent his afternoon trying to convince himself that he was alive. He had to do this himself, because nobody else seemed to want to do it for him. Naruto had no parents to love him, care for him, and be proud of him. He had no friends to support him or pick him up when he went down. Hell, most people found it too much of an effort to even acknowledge him, and those that did treated him like a nuisance or a speck of dirt, rather than as a living, breathing thing. And so, Uzumaki Naruto did his utmost to make people acknowledge him. Even if the attention he received from his troublemaking was negative, it still told him what he desperately needed to know. He existed. It was sad, but until he could graduate from the academy and show them a Naruto whose existence could not be denied by anyone, it was the only way he knew to make people look at him. It hurt him, knowing that the only eyes that he could turn his way were so cold and hateful. Some days, as on this one, Naruto just felt hopeless. And on those days, he sat here, on his swing, trying to find a reason to continue. He got up from his swing and began walking, until his feet found the edge of the forest, a place of solitude where he could let down his prankster mask without fear. Sometimes, he said to the summer air, I wish that someone would look at me without those eyes. His emotional reverie was interrupted by the crunching of the forest floor beneath heavy feet. Turning swiftly and drawing an old, chipped kunai, Naruto searched frantically for the source of the noise. If someone was going to attack him out here with those cold eyes, he'd be damned if he didn't beat them to a bloody pulp. However, the source of the noise was not an assailant. The man who faced Naruto now was the least threatening looking man that Naruto had ever seen, because he didn't have those hateful eyes. In fact, he had no eyes at all, and he was in such a state of hurt that he couldn't possibly have been a threat to a 2-year-old, let alone the blonde Hokage to be. Naruto dropped the kunai in shock. The eyeless man's head turned towards him. He'd heard the knife hit the ground. Taking a step forward, he spoke with a pained, ragged voice. And ninja? Naruto fought through his surprise and responded, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I'm going to be Hokage one day. Ah, the stranger groaned. Good, you can, help me. Then, his energy expended, he collapsed to the forest floor. Oi! Ni-chan. Hang on. The young Naruto ran to the injured, blind stranger, a new determination in his blue eyes. This man had not yelled at him, had not assumed from his loud, boyish voice that he was not just some useless kid, had not scoffed at his ambition to become Hokage. He had immediately put his trust in him, Uzumaki Naruto, and asked for help. Nobody in Konohagakure had ever accepted help from him before. Don't worry, Ni-chan. I'll get you to the village. This person trusted Naruto willingly, where nobody else had. If he needed help, then Uzumaki Naruto would make sure that he got it. When he awoke, the blind man found himself in a clean hospital bed, swathed in several bandages on his arms, left leg, and abdomen. He felt dull aching sensations beneath the wraps, but otherwise his body was completely free of pain. Also, the emaciated feeling had completely vanished, and he was more than ready to believe that his lost blood had been miraculously replenished as well. This was a welcome discovery to him. Quite frankly, he'd expected not to wake up. I'm pleased that I did, though, he thought to himself, a small smile crossing his face. That young ninja must be pretty good if he managed to save my sorry behind. As soon as he moved his hands to feel out his surroundings, said young ninja piped up from a chair across the room. Ni-chan. You survived. Thanks to your intervention. Yeah, I did. The blind man's smile broadened. Uzumaki Naruto, was it? You've got my gratitude, boy. It must have been a pain dragging me here, nay? Nothing that a future Hokage couldn't handle. The eyeless one didn't know what a Hokage was, but the boy's energy was infectious, so he didn't question him. When he failed to respond immediately, Naruto asked his own question. So, Ni-chan, what got you so beat up? Was it enemy ninja? I have a name, you know, the man chuckled. It's Keisuke, not Ni-chan. As for what did that to me, I couldn't really tell if they were shinobi or not. When they found me, I'd been away from civilization a long time, and it was hard enough just trying to figure out where I was. But Keisuke Ni-san, couldn't you have figured it out from their headbands? Or their ninjutsu? Keisuke sighed at the kid's continued use of Ni-san, but declined to challenge it again, opting instead to just answer the question. I can't see anything, so I wouldn't be able to figure it out through an article of clothing, and just because they didn't use any jutsu doesn't mean that they weren't capable of it, especially since they probably wouldn't feel the need to use jutsu on a starved blind man anyway. Keisuke couldn't see the blonde's face fall in disappointment, but he could feel the kid's aura begin to show signs of frustration. Apparently, the young one had been anticipating some cool ninja story. He smiled again. Kids could be such great entertainment sometimes. Keisuke said, I'll tell you this, though, ninja or not, those guys sure were mean little bastards. Suddenly, a stern voice interrupted from the doorway. All right, you, she said, indicating Naruto, out. Bad enough that you dirtied one of our patients by convincing Hokage-sama to have us give him your filthy blood, but I won't have you teaching him how to muck up our village, out. Keisuke sensed anger and a bit of defiance in the kid's aura, the latter of which was quickly suppressed. Yeah, Naruto said. I'm going. Keisuke Ni-chan. I hope you get out of there soon. This woman's a nightmare. With that, a scuffle began as young Naruto was chased out of the room. Keisuke could only laugh at that. However, he had not expected a hospital nurse to be so hostile to a kid. What could he have done to make her refer to his blood as filthy? He wondered. It can't be that bad, especially since the kid was nice enough to let me have some. Naruto-kun, I hope you survive. Judging the woman's actions, I think you may be right. That said, Keisuke relaxed into the bed, letting sleep hasten his recovery. Released from the hospital, Keisuke wandered the village, which, he had learned, was called Konoha, in search of replacements for his worn, ragged garments. This was an urgent need, as he could feel the stares that the villagers were giving him. He wondered briefly whether this was because of his empty eye sockets or because his clothing wasn't covering as much of him as it should have been. He assumed that it was the former, but would not have been surprised if the latter was true. These rags had survived some pretty lavish torture. Initially, he'd attempted to find a clothing store by heading towards the place where he sensed the most female auras, but this had yielded the rather unpleasant result of him walking into the women's baths. Apparently, morning hot baths were popular in Konoha. Keisuke had been the recipient of several punches, kicks, and bruises before one woman, upon attempting to gouge his eyes out, had discovered that he had no eyes to gouge and therefore could not have been sneaking into the women's bath to peep at naked girls. So now, a half-clothed, battered, and lost Keisuke was trying to come up with a new way to locate a clothing shop. His salvation turned out to be none other than Uzumaki Naruto. Oi, Keisuke Ni-chan. You lost? Keisuke felt himself smiling again. This kid's energy was infectious. Ni-chan, I still think that orange would have looked totally kick-ass on you. And I still think that wearing clothes that scream, hit me, isn't in my best interest. Having managed to avoid being clothed entirely in orange, Keisuke had no way of knowing what orange or any other color was. But he did know by word of mouth that it was one of the most annoyingly noticeable colors, and did not want to stand out by his loud young friend. Keisuke walked out of one store clad in tough black pants, thick-soled boots, a black t-shirt with a red spiral emblem, dark green fingerless gloves which sported metal plates, and a dark green vest, which he chose to leave unzipped. Dark sunglasses hid his eyeless sockets, giving him a look of normalcy in the bright Konoha afternoon. In his hand, he held a bag with 3 matching sets of clothing, a winter jacket, and some semi-formal wear for special occasions. How his young friend had been able to pay for all of it, Keisuke did not know. Ah, don't worry about it, Ni-chan, Naruto said. Old man Hokage gives me money every year for new clothes, but I haven't outgrown most of my stuff this year. You need it more than I do, anyway. Old man Hokage? So you don't live with your parents? I don't have any parents to live with. Keisuke's eyebrows arched, showing his surprise. I'm sorry, that must be tough. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it, you know? Keisuke smiled. For a kid so small to be so independent and thoughtful, it was a true miracle to Keisuke's worried mind. You're really something, Naruto-kun. Since I'd been gone from civilization such a long time, I was worried that the world might have become a bad place to live. But since I know that such strong kids like you still exist, I guess I was worried over nothing. Naruto was having a similar feeling about things. Not everyone, it seemed, was inclined to automatically ignore him or treat him like pond scum. Glad I could help, Keisuke-ni-san. I'd better get to the academy and get chewed out by Iruka-sensei. If you're still around later, I'll show you Ichiraku, this awesome ramen bar. You'll love it. I'm looking forward to it, Naruto-kun, until next time. Hyuga Hinata watched silently from the shadows as Naruto, the boy she admired, went about his youthful life. She tended to do this often during the brief periods after the academy let out and, on occasion, she was capable of losing track of time and earning a sharp rebuke from her father. It was a behavior that she had picked up not long after she had entered the academy, and though she knew that it wasn't quite a normal thing to do, she did not plan on stopping any time soon. After all, this wasn't just any boy that she was. For lack of a more sugar-coated word, stalking. Naruto was the shining example of everything that Hinata wasn't. As a member of the famed Hyuga clan, Hinata was expected to meet standards far above those of the average shinobi. However, thus far she had shown no more promise than anyone else among the academy classes, and even though she had been trained in her family's Juken Taijutsu style since she was 3 years old, her form was far from perfect. As a result, her father, along with many others of the main family, had begun to view her as a weak person. She knew this absolutely. It was plain as day in their eyes, and after going through this treatment for a few years she had started to believe it herself. Naruto, though, was something else entirely. The boy had borne the weight of those disgusted looks for as long as Hinata had known him, and yet it didn't stop him. It did not even slow him down. Where people expected so much from Hinata, they expected next to nothing from Naruto. In spite of this, Naruto would charge headlong into any challenge set before him. Be it the mastery of a jutsu or simply his eternal quest for attention, and seek to overpower it with all his young might. Even when beaten, he never quit, but rose again to throw himself into his task until he either succeeded or collapsed from exhaustion. He was everything that Hinata wished she could be, and more. Therefore, no sooner had she known him, she had developed a feeling for him very like hero worship. The more she saw him, the stronger the admiration became. Today's Naruto stalking was little different from the other days. The academy let them go. Naruto hung around the shuriken practice area for a while before heading off to Ichiraku for lunch. However, today he'd managed to meet up with a tall stranger in rags, who he addressed as Keisuke-ni-chan. Both men's faces had lit up upon seeing each other, and Naruto didn't hesitate to drag him back into the ramen bar with him. Hinata's face flushed a little as she watched Naruto dig into his 7th bowl of pork ramen that afternoon. She admired his spirit, but she still wasn't quite used to witnessing this phenomenon yet. The stranger's face expressed little, but the smile on his face widened as he had his first helping. Ichiraku was not, after all, Naruto's only source of lunch because the food was bad. The stranger and Naruto exchanged a few words before parting, and as he walked off, Naruto had one of the biggest smiles on his face that Hinata had ever seen, bigger than the one she usually saw after he ate his ramen. Hinata's face grew slightly red at this. The last few times she had watched this, Naruto's smile seemed to bring a strange heat and lightheadedness to her, a feeling completely alien to her young mind. Disturbingly, she had no idea what it was. Naruto-kun, she breathed quietly, no other words managing to escape. Those 4 syllables seemed to express her whole world in these kinds of moments. "You like him, don't you?" asked a strange voice from behind her. Hinata jumped. It was the stranger that Naruto had been talking to. She had not seen or heard him approach at all. Before she could begin any other reaction, he spoke again. "I felt your eyes on us when I sat down at the ramen bar. It's a bit rude to sit there and stare at people, you know, especially without telling them. I believe it's called stalking, actually. Hinata wasn't very good with speaking to strangers, and her reply was a broken, "GG Gomen Nas Si." Don't worry about it, girl. I could never stay mad at a cute kid like you, he said, ruffling Hinata's hair with one hand as he spoke. Just don't let me catch you doing that when I'm around again, or I'll turn you in to someone with the authority to discipline you for it. I'm not one for stalking. His smile returned to his face as he asked again, so, you must like Naruto-kun quite a bit then, Hinata was silent, but her redness had intensified somewhat at this. The man seemed to understand, though. He gave her a nod and reassured her, don't worry. I won't tell anyone if you don't want me to. That's a promise. Hinata let out the breath she'd been holding and responded with, arigato gozaimasu. My name is Keisuke, by the way. I'm pleased to meet you, friend of Naruto-kun. Anyo. I am Hyuga Hinata. Hyuga, Keisuke frowned, for reasons the young Hyuga girl did not know. Yes, she said, then gasped as she remembered, oh, no, it's much later than I realized. I should have returned home an hour ago. Father will be angry. She turned and started toward her clan's property. Keisuke stopped her with a hand on her shoulder and said, hey now, no need for you to suffer your father's wrath on my account. I'll walk home with you and explain that I held you up. Besides, he said, his mouth set in a sudden determination, I should very much like to see how the Hyuga have fared in these times. Hinata was unsure how this Keisuke was connected to her family, but since he was kind enough to offer his protection against a scolding, she accepted. Keisuke's thoughts raced inside his head at a rate that made a flying shuriken seem like a slowly revolving carousel. Hyuga, that had been the name that Keisuke's own son had taken after fleeing the house on his 16th birthday. As he turned the name over and over in his head, he felt himself becoming anxious. This girl, her father, could they be? There was a way to find out. Keisuke's wife had told her about his son's gloriously pale and highly efficient eyes, and Keisuke himself had sensed that his aura was thicker towards the region that enveloped the front of his head. He tuned out his other senses, putting all of his attention on his sense of touch so that he could sense the subtle vibration of Hinata's aura. What Keisuke felt made him almost groan aloud. The girl had the same heaviness of aura in the front of her head. Though it was remotely possible that he was wrong, Keisuke was fairly sure now that Hyuga Hinata was, however distantly, related to his runaway son. The knowledge only made his anxiety 10 times worse. He could remember his jailer's last words to him. Though they will strive for purity, their existence was cursed from the moment of your birth. They are, and ever will be, damned. It is my hope that you do not rot here. I would very much like to see your anguished face when you meet them again. Keisuke shook off the demoness's parting monologue, struggling to drag his nerves back to the surface. The sadistic was wrong. She had to be. Hyuga Hinata was far from damned, in his eyes. If she was typical of her family, then there should be nothing for him to worry about. These thoughts gave Keisuke confidence as his companion led him through what sounded like a large gate. At once, they were accosted by a man who Keisuke presumed was Hinata's father. Hinata, the man began, sternness evident in his deep voice, you are very late. I told you to return here immediately after the academy had finished with you. Did you forget? Hinata bowed her head in shame. Gomen, pardon me. Hyuga-san, Keisuke interjected, but the fault is mine. I am a newcomer to this village, and lost my way. Hinata-chan was kind enough to show me where I might obtain food and lodging, though she needn't have bothered. I am sorry that I interfered with your plans. The man's aura did not change, but remained the stern, seemingly immovable force that it had been since it had appeared. Because you are a stranger, I forgive you. However, I must ask that you do not interfere again. Hinata's training must be the most important part of her life if she is to gain the strength that she needs to head the Hyuga clan. Now Keisuke felt something. A flash of something negative in Hinata's direction. Disappointment. Already, she has fallen considerably behind schedule. At this, Keisuke's perception gave him glimpses of a reality that he had been loath to see. This Hyuga was more concerned with Hinata, his heir, rather than Hinata, his daughter. Already, a part of the demoness's prediction was beginning to seem like truth. Desperate to prove otherwise, Keisuke dared to probe a little. He steeled himself as he spoke again. I will honor your wishes, Hyuga. Hiyashi. Hyuga Hiyashi, he repeated. I'll not bother you a second time, unless I am invited. Keisuke secretly felt that the latter part of his vow was unnecessary. It seemed highly unlikely that Hiyashi was the type to welcome visitors. But, if I may, I'll ask a question before I leave you. Hiyashi did not react. Keisuke interpreted his silence as a lack of rejection rather than lack of permission, and continued. There is an impurity in your aura, and in the aura of your child, that is reminiscent of an acquaintance of mine. May I know who it was that founded your clan? To his dismay, Keisuke's ploy worked as intended. Hiyashi's aura became tinged with surprise at the word impurity, and was quickly replaced by an unmistakable seriousness. Hinata, he commanded, his severity perceptible in his voice, get inside. Hinata hastily obeyed. As soon as she passed out of range of Keisuke's hearing, Hiyashi spoke again. What do you know of the Hyuga? You say that you are a stranger to Konoha. Are you a spy? An assassin? A diplomat? Speak, or I will arrest you and have you interrogated. Keisuke felt words left unspoken in the intensity of his aura. If you survive. Not wanting to take the chance, Keisuke opted to speak. I am not a diplomat, nor an assassin, nor a spy. I merely wish to know if you are a relative of my acquaintance, since you share the same impurity, and most likely the same power as a result of that impurity. Said impurity suddenly became much more noticeable in Hiyashi's aura. Ah, Keisuke continued, so you do have it. The Byakugan is not an impurity. My ancestors purged themselves of impurity long before you or I was born. The power which you name impure is the sacred strength of the Hyuga clan, and we protect it with all of our considerable will and might. Keisuke scowled. This Hyuga Hiyashi was proving quite difficult indeed, and the more he spoke, the more Keisuke began to see the demoness's manipulation in him. Insistently, Keisuke asked, but my acquaintance. There are no Hyuga living outside of Konoha that do not bear the caged bird curse seal. The seal makes the Byakugan impossible to detect in one's aura unless it is active. Your friend was likely carrying some kind of impurity, but he was not Hyuga. Keisuke wailed inwardly. A curse seal. How far will these Hyuga go to protect their sacred strength, which they obtained from demonic blood? They are blind. He felt himself losing hope. Though they will strive for purity, they are, and ever will be, damned. Futilely, Keisuke asked, your founder, it is not your place to know. The Hyuga's voice had risen considerably, and Keisuke felt him drop into a ready stance. Who are you, to ask such questions? If you are not a spy, sent to glean the secrets of our power, or an assassin, intending to destroy it, then what are you? Keisuke struggled to keep his intense sadness in check. Lifting his head to face Hiyashi, he removed his sunglasses, giving the Hyuga head a clear view of his eyeless face. I am, he said, voice heavy with grief, Keisuke of the grave. Hiyashi's Byakugan deactivated with a snap and his aura become one of lesser shock, but Keisuke wasn't paying attention. He was already headed out of the Hyuga compound, towards the rapidly setting sun. As Keisuke was heading out of Konoha's walls the next morning, a loud, energetic, and blonde ninja in training caught up to him. A look of sadness was on the boy's face. Keisuke Ni-chan, you're leaving already? Keisuke sighed. Yeah, Naruto-kun, I'm leaving. But you just got here. Naruto pouted, upset at seeing one of the first friends he ever made confirm that he was heading out. Why do you have to go now? Naruto-kun, Keisuke began, pausing to think of what words might work. I came to Konohagakure hoping that I would be able to meet some very old friends of mine. However, when I saw them, they were completely unlike what I had hoped they would be. They hated me utterly. If I try to stay here, we won't get along, and we may cause a lot of trouble for the village. I don't want to be the cause of everyone's problems. But, Ni-chan, if they hate you so much, why don't you try to prove that you aren't worth hating? Why don't you try to become something that they can like? A sad smile came to Keisuke's lips. Naruto seemed to understand his kind of pain, because, Naruto-kun, for me to do that might get a lot of people killed. Do you want me to be a murderer? Of course not, Ni-chan, but you shouldn't have to run away from it. It's either run or be a problem to Konoha, for me, and my conscience won't let me live down the second option. Keisuke returned, gently. Besides, I don't really need to prove that they're stuck-up bastards. I have a big, strong guy like you to stay here and do it for me, Naruto-kun. Huh? Me, Ni-chan? Yes. I know you'll be one of the best ninja to ever live one day. Your heart's in the right place and you have the kind of spirit that demands respect. I have every confidence that you will prove to be stronger than almost anyone else, not just physically, but morally as well. Naruto just whined some more. But, Keisuke Ni-chan. Nothing you can say will make me remain here. Naruto, I want you to forget about me and throw everything you have into becoming stronger, for your sake and for mine. These words seemed to reach Naruto. This was the kind of thing that he could put his spirit into, even though he was sad to see his new friend leave. Okay, Ni-chan. The next time you see me, I'll be twice the ninja that your bastard friends are. I'll be disappointed if you aren't, Keisuke said, his genuine smile returning. Naruto turned and ran back toward his favorite training ground. Keisuke felt a presence tense up in the nearby shadows, apparently torn between staying where it was and following the blonde boy. Keisuke's smile widened. One Hyuga, at least, had some morality left. He called out to the shadows, "Go ahead and follow him, Hinata-chan. You'll learn a more valuable lesson from him than you ever will from your father." There was a pause, and then the presence moved off after Naruto. Satisfied, Keisuke of the Grave departed from Konoha to seek a new existence in this age, and to, if luck permitted it, take his vengeance upon the monstrosity that had cursed his line. Uzumaki Naruto heaved a sigh of exasperation as he sank into the scalding water. His body wasn't complaining, it had been worked, beaten, and tapped almost to the point of tearing itself apart, and was more than glad to let the hot spring burn its pains away. Naruto's mind, however, was not comforted. Jiraiya, his pro-tem sensei, was really getting on his nerves. Not only did the sorry, perverted excuse for legendary ninja force him to practically obliterate himself on a daily basis with his training, he never bothered to do anything for his exhausted disciple when the session was done. In his off hours, when Naruto was either passed out from fatigue or otherwise incapacitated, he would run off to whatever passed for a bathhouse in the vicinity to do what he called research for his infamous Icha Icha series. It made Naruto feel like some kind of rag doll, being tossed around, ripped up, and then neglected by some sadistic, badly parented kid. At the same time, though, he knew that he shouldn't argue over it. After all, since he'd left Konoha on this horrendous journey, his performance had been increasing at a rate which he hadn't dreamed possible in all his 14 years of life. Being trained by the world's most powerful perverted author may not have been fun in the slightest, but it most certainly did not make you weak. Naruto had already managed to master several explosive new ninjutsu techniques, shored up numerous holes in his taijutsu form, and perfected a few new inventive tricks involving his Kage Bunshin technique. His body, after taking brutal daily beatings for almost a year and a half, was many times tougher than it had been when this had begun. He still couldn't pull off anything other than the most basic genjutsu to save his life, but he was now capable of recognizing and, in many cases, breaking intermediate and upper-level illusions. He was more powerful than he had ever been, and he was getting better every day. Even so, there was no way that anyone could expect Naruto to go through this kind of treatment and not be pissed off. Damn that bastard Ero Sennin, he thought for the 100th time that day. He grumbled as he rose from the spring, knowing that said perverted hermit was at that very moment conducting his research at one of the many female-only hot spring baths in this town. Most likely, he would not see hide nor hair of Jiraiya for several hours at the very least. He decided to use the time frugally, and, after redressing, headed into the nearest ramen stall to give his muscles something to repair themselves with. "Ah," exclaimed a very satisfied Naruto, food befitting the next Hokage. "Ramen never fails to juice me up after a long week." Of course, it had taken about 20 bowls of various flavors to do it, but the ramen cook wasn't about to discourage him. This was some of the best business he'd ever had. Whoever runs the ramen shop where this kid lives must be the richest man alive, he thought. At a certain ramen bar in Konoha, Ichiraku Tuchi sneezed. Now that the demands of his body had been met, Naruto turned his attention inward, toward nostalgic daydreams of home and wondering what unbelievably complicated and awesome jutsu he would be learning next, and how Jiraiya was going to run him ragged as he learned it. Even as he fought to keep from yelling, "Damn you to hell, Ero Sennin," he could picture his sensei's red, drooling face as he entertained yet another pair of floozies. "Hell, I can even hear them," he thought aloud. Yet, as the image of his perverted sensei faded from his head, the flirtatious giggling that he'd thought he'd heard did not go away. In fact, it was getting louder. "Oh, great," he thought as he realized the truth, they're real. He swiveled in his seat to face the source of the noise, ready to yell numerous obscenities at Jiraiya, though he knew it would only get him increasingly painful training later. Yet when his eyes found the women, it was not Jiraiya that was between them. Instead, he saw a tall man bedecked in black and green, wearing sunglasses even though he was indoors, escort them to the counter and order 2 bowls of miso-flavored ramen, as well as 1 extra-large bowl of what he called that super stamina stuff. Naruto stared. Something about this man stirred something in him. The stranger was attired as a shinobi might be, with a many-pocketed vest, plated gloves, and the usual open-toed boots. Yet Naruto could not see a headband anywhere on him. This guy. Could he be a missing nin? However, Naruto's confused stare became an annoyed one when one of the women chirped, "Oh, the super stamina stuff, Kei-chan. Planning some real fun tonight, aren't we?" Both she and her friend had a look on their faces that Naruto knew all too well, and it was making him mad. Grr. This guy is no different from Ero Sennin. Well, if I have anything to say about it, he's not going to be having much fun tonight. He opened his mouth, preparing to rip the sunglasses freak a new one. And was interrupted before he began as the man, without so much as turning a hair in his direction, said, "What are you staring at, kid?" For about 2 seconds, the kid's mouth just hung open, and Keisuke wondered if he'd actually managed to shock him speechless. Unfortunately, he hadn't, and as soon as he'd gotten over being interrupted, the kid was in his face, yelling so everyone and their grandma could hear. "Who do you think I'm staring at? Not like it's hard to notice you or anything, with all the open pervertedness you're radiating." Keisuke tried to counter, but the blonde midget's trap hadn't quite shut yet. Though he was already more annoyed than he had been for a while, he mustered his patience and waited for the storm of accusations to blow itself out. He didn't have to wait long, though, because not long after the kid started, he was halted by a slap to the face, courtesy of Keisuke's lovely escort. "Who do you think you are, brat?" She berated him. "You barely know him and yet you fling all this in his face? Kei-chan isn't the kind of guy who would go to the bathhouse for a peep show." The brat rubbed his face, where a rather nice palm print had manifested, and returned fire. "Trust me, Nei-chan. I know this kind of guy wherever I am, and you are definitely being used. I am not your sister, dunce, and Kei-chan is definitely not what you think he is. He can't take peeks because he can't." Keisuke cut her off here. "That's enough, Kanoka-san. You and Sayuri-san can go home now. I'll handle the little guy." She complied, though her angry glare didn't leave the kid's face until they were both outside, where she audibly groused to her friend, "Stupid brat, ruined our fun." Before she passed out of earshot. The instant they were gone, Keisuke rose and walked over to the boy, pausing to size up his aura before speaking. The kid was angry, obviously, but what he was looking for were the subtle vibrations that would signal spiking chakra and a high level of fighting power. He found them, but they were unfocused and few. The kid was mad, but not mad enough to kill. Keisuke felt no danger. Frowning, he said, "I'm sorry that Kanoka-san did that. That mark on your face looks quite painful." "It is. Thanks a lot, freak," came the growling reply. "Even so, I'm really offended by your unprovoked attempt to degrade me." Hello. Your behavior back there was pretty provocative." Keisuke found himself getting more annoyed by the minute. What the heck was with this kid? Sure, he and his friends could be dirty-minded at times, but surely that isn't anything to lose one's temper over. Though he was ticked off himself, Keisuke contained it. Maybe the little guy was just having a bad day. I'll grant that Sayuri-san was hinting at something less than sanitary. But I can't see what it has to do with you. What's your beef with me, kid? Stop trying to act cool. I hate jerks like you, acting like you own the world and getting all the attention, then abusing that attention for your own dirty agendas. That's my beef with you. All that attention you're getting, you don't deserve any of it. And I suppose that you think you're better qualified? Hell yeah. Anyone is more qualified than you. You ain't so cool." At this point, Keisuke was about ready to blow the ignorant little punk through the roof. However, his common sense got the better of him again, so he was forced to consider alternative action. Fortunately, an idea came to mind that he thought might do the trick. "Okay, kid. How about we do this?" Naruto grinned diabolically as he approached the nearest bathhouse. His confidence was practically visible. He knew that he was going to show that freak, and it was going to be a walk in the park. and he thought that the sunglasses freak would give him a challenge. Go to a bathhouse, any bathhouse at all in this town, and see how many looks of adoration you get. Come back without another palm print on your face, and I'll acknowledge that you're not just a brat. Come back with an adoring fan, and I'll acknowledge defeat and let you think whatever you want of me. If you survive, that is. Hey. You've made the grave mistake of underestimating me, sunglasses freak. Naruto formed a hand seal, preparing the jutsu that would win him the battle in one fell swoop. Geez. All that just because Sayuri-san cracked the stamina joke again. People must be pretty stiff where that kid lives. Keisuke had a rather smug smile on his face as he made his way back to his apartment. He'd expected the little prick to lose hope at the impossibility of the task, or maybe to insist that nobody could do that and demand something easier. However, the block-headed kid accepted the challenge without a moment's hesitation. While he knew that the kid would fail, he couldn't help but admire the persistent spirit that he had. Little did he know that in mere moments, that small admiration would be horribly overpowered. As he rounded the last corner, he heard a distinctly feminine voice call out to him. Oi, sunglasses freak, what do you think of me now? Keisuke turned and edged his ear towards the voice, feeling for the person's aura. He was surprised to find that though the voice was female, it belonged to the same brat that had patronized him in the ramen shop. His aura was the same, but the kid had apparently transformed himself into a woman. He thought, why transform into a woman if you're going to attract? That's when Keisuke perceived the other auras, the ones masked behind the kid. 56 of them. All male. You moron, he yelled. What's up with you? You were supposed to bring back women. The kid grinned wider. In his sickeningly girly voice, he said, doesn't matter. You said, come back with an adoring fan, and I'll acknowledge defeat. I brought back plenty more than one. You have to give up now. Cancel the illusion and see how adoring they are when they find out you're a man. At these words, the crowd following the kid reeled in confusion, then disgust, then homophobia. In moments, every single one of them had turned and fled back to their homes, not even bothering to return to the bathhouse for their things. As far as they were concerned, it was no longer safe nor sanitary in that particular hot spring. Meanwhile, the kid, whose defeat had just been snatched from the jaws of victory, had cancelled his transformation and now sat on the ground, cursing. Keisuke then did something that he hadn't done in a while. He laughed, and hard. The kid, naturally, didn't take kindly to this. What the heck is so funny? When he'd managed to get up enough breath to speak normally, Keisuke responded, Kid. As stupid as you are, if you'd watched those men react that way towards me, you'd just about piss yourself, too. Indeed, rang a voice that Keisuke did not know. Watching this exchange was extremely entertaining. Perhaps I can convince Orochimaru-sama to keep Naruto-kun alive as a comic relief. The voice was definitely malicious, and when Keisuke found its aura, and the auras of its two accomplices, he found killer intent to match it. We have no quarrel with you, it continued, speaking to Keisuke alone this time, but if you choose to come between us and our target, my subordinates and I will kill you without remorse or hesitation. Keisuke's percipience let him detect the flare of surprise and then hatred as the kid recognized who it was that possessed the voice. You're Orochimaru's wussy errand boy. You're Kabuto. Why, Naruto-kun, I'm pleased to see that you remembered, said the malevolent one. Kabuto. I give you greetings from Sasuke-kun, but I'd just be giving you false hope. He seems to have only enough room in his thoughts for Orochimaru-sama and his brother. Keisuke could feel the kid's chakra burning now. To his horror, it was nothing at all like the force that he had seen him muster at the ramen stall. This time, the kid was not only willing to kill, but it seemed almost like he was capable of ripping up half the village to do it. Something really big is going on here. If the villagers get involved, it could end up being a massacre. I should try to defuse this as quickly as possible. Raising his voice over the kid's low growls, Keisuke spoke. Oi, Kabuto-san. Your target is the kid, Naruto, right? It looks to me like this could be a pretty destructive conflict. Are you sure you want to do this here, where innocent bystanders could get killed? The malicious edge in Kabuto's aura did not dissipate. Orochimaru-sama wants Naruto-kun either captured or killed as soon as it may be done. Any hesitation on our part could lead to his enemy, Akatsuki, catching him first and extracting the demon, Kyuubi, from him for their own use. This is the most opportune time for us to act, while Jiraiya is occupied, and we will withhold nothing." To punctuate his words, Kabuto flung a series of knives at the kid, Naruto, who managed to dodge them easily, but whose trajectory carried him into the grasp of a third henchman, who'd hidden himself in the shadow of a nearby alley. Keisuke made to rush for the captured boy, but he needn't have bothered. Naruto unleashed a surge of chakra that flung his captor away. Unfortunately, this burst of raw power also left a rather large crater in the street. Keisuke felt an urgent need to intervene. If this was allowed to continue, civilian deaths would become a certainty. He began to feed chakra outside his body, extending his percipience, and positioning his power for use. He wished he'd obtained the abilities that he had long ago, when it could have served his personal agenda. Unfortunately, he had only recently perfected them and it was useless in that particular cause now. But he'd be damned if he didn't use them to protect this village, and this funny, loud-mouthed kid. Before he could move, though, Naruto had stopped for a moment to reconcentrate his power after his burst, and Kabuto had rushed him in that interval. Orochimaru's servant moved with incredible speed and precision, striking several points in his peripheral nervous system. Keisuke sensed a sort of inversion in the boy's aura, and as he observed, Naruto began to thrash rather wildly, his movements illogical and jerky. "Don't bother moving anymore, Naruto-kun," said Kabuto, "you'll only hurt yourself. I used a trick that I borrowed from Tsunade. Your movements will be the opposite of the movements that you intend to make. For example, if you wanted to move your left arm forward, your right leg would be what responds. It's a very disconcerting technique, isn't it?" A couple of Kabuto's underlings laughed lightly at this, while others moved in to bind Naruto's arms and legs, and affix what Keisuke thought might be a paper seal to his abdomen. As soon as it touched, Naruto thrashed and gave a painful scream. That seal absorbs chakra that you generate and focuses it back upon you in the form of an electrical current. If you want to have a relatively comfortable journey, we advise that you keep calm. Kabuto turned to Keisuke now. "I'd like to thank you for not interfering. You'll be glad to know that with Naruto-kun gone, there will be no further danger to this village." With that, the group leapt to the rooftops and headed out towards the forest to the east of the village. Keisuke waited until they had cleared the village walls, and then got busy. He wrapped 3 arms of his extended chakra around himself, digging into his skin. It itched as it sank in, but Keisuke was used to it. When it was finished, he felt the elaborate pattern that the chakra had carved into his skin, felt the power that it gave him. He was able now, he would catch them before they got far. 64 ghostly arms. Shisoku no Kakuin. Hyuga Hinata was many things. First, she was a ninja from Konohagakure. Secondly, and even more importantly, she was a member of the famed Hyuga clan, and not only that, but she was slated to be the next head of that clan. She was also shy, quiet, and the admirer of her village's #1 loudmouth and ramen consumer, Konoha's most surprising ninja, though her shyness and quietness had prevented the way too dense boy from knowing anything of it. But perhaps most importantly of all, at the moment, she was a Chunin examination student, and she was being rather brutally assaulted by a fellow examinee in the 3rd and final test. Her opponent was a cloud ninja, native to the village where this year's examination was being held. She had come here knowing next to nothing about the cloud except that they had in the past been some of the Hyuga's greatest enemies. Now, after being pitted against one in this match, she was beginning to understand why. Hinata's opponent fought in the traditional lightning nin style, attacking from a distance with a vast arsenal of ninjutsu and genjutsu techniques, many of them involving, predictably, various forms of lightning which Hinata's Byakugan had difficulty detecting in a timely manner, as well as a multitude of throwing weapons. He used taijutsu only when necessary to defend himself from Hinata's close-range counterattacks. Apparently, whoever had taught this boy was well acquainted with the Hyuga's style. As a result, Hinata was tired and winded from protecting herself and her charges from multiple ranged attacks, and burned in some places where she had failed to act in time. She was losing her match by 4 targets. To complete the seemingly hopeless scene, her teammates watching her from the combatants' waiting area were silent. Kiba, who was normally the loudest one on their team, grimaced whenever Hinata suffered another blow, but could offer no helpful cheers in this grim situation. Shino, being Shino, was as impassively quiet as ever, and equally useless. Though they knew that she had improved and strengthened, they didn't believe that she could win this. Not that she was weak, They knew more than anybody how far she had come, but they, like everyone else in this village, believed that this Cloud Nin was stronger than any other examinee this year. Hinata didn't blame them, but she still wished that they could have shown a little more faith in her. Like he had. Reluctantly, she grit her teeth and pushed those thoughts aside. She could not afford them while her life was on the line. She knew that she still had a shot at this, but not if she didn't focus on the battle in front of her. The Lightning Ninja's variant of the final Chunin test was different from the one in Konoha. In addition to fighting each other, each combatant also had to protect 7 targets, which were lined up on their end of the field in a half circle. The examinees were free to move them around, but it was generally easier to just protect them where they were. The things were so fragile that one might easily crush one in his or her hand by accident. The Cloud Nin had managed to protect 6 of his targets, having lost one to Hinata's kunai while temporarily blinded by his own technique, a particularly bright flash of ball lightning. Hinata, though, had lost all but 2 of her targets to her opponent's precise long-range strikes. In spite of this, her Nindo demanded that she hold herself ready, continue the fight. She refused to give up. The Cloud Nin, however, only laughed at her continued determination. "You know that all your will is effectless here, Hyuga," he said, chuckling to himself as he ran through a set of seals. "I could have simply killed you and been done with it in less than a minute. But fortunately for you, I am not like my barbaric ancestors. Your utter defeat and humiliation will suffice." With that, the boy ran towards her with 5 tags sporting kunai in hand. "He's going to attack head-on," thought Hinata in surprise. All his prior attacks had been executed almost from standoff range. Now he was suddenly going to charge her? As Hinata hastily braced herself for a physical assault, the boy surprised her again, leaping over her head and tossing the knives down around her in a pentagon pattern that was several feet across. Hinata turned to face him too late. The boy was already finished with his second set of head seals. Before she could rush to intercept him, he let loose his jutsu. Ninpo. 5 treacherous lightnings. The 5 tags attached to the kunai lit up, each one a different color, and spouted multicolored lightning right at Hinata. Faced with no other choice, she countered with her ultimate defense. Shugo Hake. Rokujuyan Sho. Hinata flailed her chakra in all directions, and the bolts were deflected, lanced, and dissipated before a single one of them touched her. Not wasting any time, she rushed to intercept her opponent as he made to attack one of her targets. But she was too late yet again. The blast of burning lightning incinerated the flimsy thing milliseconds before she got there. She now had only one target left. The Cloud Genin guffawed. "A worthy effort, and an impressive self-defense, certainly. But I'm afraid it's futile. You are not fast enough to best me. Really, it's better if you just give up now." Hinata just glared at him, Byakugan eyes in full vein-popping flower, and said, "No." He chortled again. "No, surely you can't mean to continue. With odds this bad, it's better to just save face and get out before you're humiliated any more. I'm sure your Hyuga masters wouldn't like you to bring any more shame upon them." "Don't I know it?" Hinata thought. Her father had indeed faced her before she had left for the Cloud Village, explaining point blank that if she did not come back as a Chunin, she would no longer be considered for the position of head of the clan. "Nevertheless," she said, "I swore before the exam that I would see this through to the end. I don't go back on my word. That is my Nindo." She cursed herself for faltering at those words. Those words were sacred to her. She shared her Nindo with the boy she so admired and loved. Now that she had spoken them, she would do everything in her power to vindicate them. "I admire your persistence," replied the Cloud Nin, "but it is past time that I put an end to this. I do have other matches to fight, after all." And he rushed her again, performing the same maneuver that he had employed last time. Hinata was not fast enough to escape, and was caught. She now faced 2 choices. Defend herself and sacrifice the target in the match, or attempt to save the target and potentially kill herself. To any sane person it would have been a no-brainer. Or so the Cloud Nin thought. To say that he was surprised to see the white-eyed, blue-haired, and now severely burned Hyuga right in front of him would have been the worst kind of understatement. Hinata's tired and singed face showed only raw determination as she spoke, and in spite of her injuries, she moved flawlessly as she settled into the stance that few enemies of the Hyuga lived to tell about. "Charging in head-on was a mistake. You are in range of my divination." In the waiting area, Kiba and Shino's eyes widened. They knew what was coming next, and after the way this match had been going, they couldn't quite believe it. Juken move. Hake Rokujuyan show. The lightning nin's face grew white. He had only heard this stance and this technique spoken of by the most seasoned of veterans. Was this what he thought? He had no time to think anything more. 2 strikes. The first 2 strikes hit him, and he was having trouble recovering for a counter. 4 strikes. The next set hit him, and now he was struggling just to stand. 8 strikes. The lightning ninja who were watching from the stadium were wondering why their greatest prodigy hadn't halted the Hyuga's advance yet. 16 strikes. Kiba was now on his feet and yelling himself hoarse. 32 strikes. By this point, the Hyuga's repeated attacks were the only things keeping the Cloud Genin upright. 64 strikes. When the assault ceased, his face was in the grass, and all the people of the village hidden in the clouds fell back into their seats with mouths agape. Neither he nor they would rise again for some time. After about 2 minutes, the examiner who had presided over the match was the first to find his voice. The winner by knockout. Hyuga Hinata. Kiba rushed out onto the battleground to congratulate Hinata, Shino not far behind, and immediately jumped back off when 6 shuriken flew right by his head. He watched with astonishment as they passed and shredded the lightning nin's remaining target dummies. Now it was his turn to gape in awe as the paper and straw dummies fell in pieces to the ground. When he recovered, he approached Hinata again, more cautiously this time, and proceeded to complain. "Geez, Hinata. You didn't need to do that, you already won the match, and you could have taken my head off." Hinata, though, was not quite all there. "Naruto-kun," she mumbled, "I did it." Hyuga Hinata was many things. First, she was the victor of this match. Secondly, and even more importantly, she would leave the Cloud Village as a Chunin. She was also strong, determined, and in love with the world's #1 loudest and most surprising ninja, Uzumaki Naruto, though he had been gone a year and would be gone perhaps 2 more. And now, she was passed out from her injuries and her exertions, face down on the same grass as her defeated opponent. Kabuto's smile was plastered to his face like white on fresh snow. His men held the struggling Kyuubi container securely, and already they were miles away from the village where his guardian, Jiraiya, was no doubt still conducting his research. Orochimaru had planned this months in advance. He knew that his old friend the Toad Sennin, being the pervert he was, wouldn't be able to resist stopping in the hot spring capital of the water country at least once. He had stationed advance sentries nearby to warn Kabuto of their approach, and to be ready to capture or kill Naruto at the first opportunity. Capture was preferable, of course. Orochimaru would love to be able to play with the boy before he killed him, and was sure that young Sasuke wouldn't mind some fun either. It had gone perfectly. With Jiraiya occupied, there had been nothing to stop them. They were a mere week away from the Snake Sennin's current hideout, and once the Kyuubi brat was safely there, the last of Sasuke's old friends would be gone, and with it all of Sasuke's inhibitions. For while Naruto still lived, Orochimaru knew that his student would never reach the full potential that he wanted for his next vessel. As it was, the boy spent too much time staring off into the horizon, always in the direction of his old home. Orochimaru couldn't have that. Once Naruto was dead, that focus-sapping habit would stop. And who knew? Maybe young Sasuke would work up the nerve to do it himself. Perhaps unlocking the fabled Mangekyo Sharingan that Itachi possessed and Orochimaru craved. Even Kabuto shivered a little, thinking of the power of those eyes. Well, first things first. And the first thing that had to happen was for them to take Naruto to the lair. It shouldn't have been that hard. In fact, victory seemed almost assured at this point, thus explaining why the grin was stuck on Kabuto's face like white on fresh snow. Little did Kabuto know, they had neglected the one factor that might have turned that snow from white to a very unpleasant yellow. A strangled shout from the back of the group caught Kabuto's attention. Halting and turning around, he watched as the sound nin who was carrying the Kyuubi kid struggled to get his legs free of the large sheet of ice that encased not only him, but much of the surrounding soil and vegetation. The man had barely enough time to gasp out, "What the?" before a large, blunt object collided with his head and a detonation of bright chakra ripped him free of the ice and smashed him into a nearby tree. When Kabuto recovered his vision after the burst of light, he realized that the blonde kid the man had been holding had gone missing while he was blinded. After a moment of bewildered silence, he turned to his remaining henchmen. "Find the Kyuubi kid, quickly, Orochimaru-sama won't be pleased if we miss this chance." "No," said a voice from the trees, "I expect you won't be." Keisuke's tone was a low, quiet, matter-of-fact drone, in stark contrast to his usual lively timbre. It was a tone that he preferred to use often in serious conflicts with dangerous opponents. Having never known intimidation by sight, he had learned very early the ways in one might be intimidated by sound, and particularly by voice. For good measure, he removed his sunglasses. He knew that his lack of eyes made some people uncomfortable. He went on, "I'm sorry for not clarifying my intentions in our previous encounter. However, I think it's fair, since you didn't exactly announce yours before you assaulted the boy." Keisuke indicated Naruto, with his bonds cut, who was now working to re-coordinate his mind and muscles with all his will. Keisuke had pulled him from the ice trap after his throw had detonated, and had freed him from the ropes. He had no knowledge to undo Kabuto's medical technique, but it looked as though it was wearing off. Naruto's movements were becoming less awkward. It would be a while, though. Keisuke would have to fight off the boy's attackers until then. He removed his vest and overshirt, leaving him in a white undershirt which covered much less skin, freeing the arms of chakra underneath to do their work along with the others. He extended them to their full range, and felt his range of sensitivity increase tenfold. He couldn't help but smirk. Since he had acquired this ability, he had become the most perceptive blind man to walk this world. Might as well take the offensive while they're still confused, he thought. Better be careful, though. I used up 4 threads already with that ice trap. Leaping towards the pack of stunned sound nins, Keisuke wrapped some chakra arms into himself. Ensatsu Kakuin. Kasai. Commanding card seal. Conflagration. Violent flames erupted from the shining red seal that had formed on Keisuke's skin which, combined with his empty eye sockets, gave him the appearance of some kind of hell spawn as he came. Apparently his intimidation tactics were working. One sound ninja tripped over himself as he tried to move out of the way. Another one forgot all reason and just charged him with a long katana, which Keisuke sidestepped before burying his burning fist in the man's stomach, causing him to hit the ground with a satisfying thud. Keisuke didn't stay put to watch him roll around on the ground while his clothing burned away. He had the remaining 2 henchmen to worry about. These 2 were smarter. One of them attempted to keep him busily in short-range combat, while the other tried to strike him with ninjutsu from afar. Undoubtedly better than those other 2, he observed, but if they believe I'm too blind to recognize this kind of maneuver, then they're still pretty stupid. Keisuke grappled with the first one long enough to let the second one aim his shot, then dropped to the ground, swept his opponent's legs out from beneath him, and dispatched him with a well-placed backhanded blow to the face, which sent him careening into the same tree as his first fallen comrade with his head aflame. Then he waited for the second enemy's attack to come. He didn't wait long. One well-timed Kawarimi no Jutsu later, he was back in the trees, and an unfortunate chunk of wood was blasted to splinters. Releasing his Kakuin, he reached his chakra arms out to feel for his enemies. Yep, he thought, he's still there, watching for me. This one's probably a decent chunin. Nowhere near strong enough for me, though. Now, that other one, the med nin. He might be a problem. But I'd best finish the small fry first. Maybe once the medic sees his flunkies on the ground he'll puss out. Concentrating, he used his chakra arms to make the seals for one of his favorite jutsus. Kabuto watched intently as the blind man made complete fools out of the sound chunin team. It was rare for him to witness such unique power. He'd seen Orochimaru give cursed seals to numerous victims in the past, but never before had he seen seals carve themselves into someone's skin before. Most likely it was some form of bloodline limit technique that Orochimaru had yet to discover. If it was, then the Snake Sennin would be very interested to know about it. An even better outcome would be the capture of this eyeless wonder, but if that were not feasible, then his death would be enough. He observed as the blind man jumped out at his last remaining underling, who, being the most capable of the lot, managed to turn quickly enough to land a hit. But, as soon as he did, the blind man's clone detonated, and the last remaining sound chunin became a burned, bloody heap. Interesting technique. A bomb clone, Kabuto thought. As clever and devastating as it was for that poor idiot, it had to use up quite a bit of chakra. Our blind friend should be pretty winded. Hell, he didn't even need to waste time looking for him. The fool had already stepped out into the open. Keisuke didn't want to waste time playing hide and seek. His bomb clone had burned a nice hole in the forest floor. He hoped that this was enough to scare the creep away, but it helped to be physically present rather than to hide while playing the intimidation game. If you're anywhere near the level of your flunkies there, you're not going to last very long, he said. Do you still mean to fight me? In answer, Kabuto smirked, drew kunai, and flung them with surgical precision at Keisuke's heart, forehead, lungs, and stomach. Keisuke felt them coming, seized the one coming for his head, and used it to deflect the ones aimed at his heart and lungs. But as he sidestepped the knife that was bound for his gut, he felt the med nin rush forward. Just a little too quickly for his liking. No doubt about it, this one was definitely better than his underlings. Shit. He reformed his conflagration seal, sent the flames out along all of his remaining extended arms, and spun himself like a top. Kasai Kaden. Conflagration whirl. The spinning blaze that resulted made Kabuto balk just as he came within range and then leap away. Very interesting. If I hadn't been on my toes I might have been cooked. But you're out of luck. You won't be able to walk straight for a while. Keisuke thought, but he didn't hit me. He turned out to be wrong. Kabuto's scalpel technique had hit just before his flames had. He sank to his knees, unable to balance correctly. Kabuto smirked again. I have cut one of the tendons in your right leg, he said. You'll find movement to be complicated. With that, the med nin began slowly advancing. He would be able to catch this one after all. Orochimaru would be very happy. Yet his smirk was short-lived. Keisuke's own smirk was plastered on his face as he mouthed, "Release," and swept a chakra-pumped arm over the seal that was hidden in the leaves below Kabuto's feet. Instantly, the ground below the med nin's feet imploded, dragging him waist-deep into the earth. Rasengan. Keisuke watched as the boy, Naruto, whom both combatants had forgotten, leap from a tree and slam his orb of swirling chakra into Kabuto's side. Not even 4 feet of solid earth could prevent Kabuto from being flung several yards backwards. How's that, you pansy? Yelled Naruto from his perch on the branch. Keisuke couldn't help but smile. The kid was definitely unique. He'd been planning on finishing the pansy himself, but he supposed it was better this way. The kid deserved some payback after that humiliation. And that was also one seriously cool jutsu he had used. Climbing up onto one knee, Keisuke took on his low droning voice once more. The odds are 2-1 in our favor now, he said. To add effect, he reformed his conflagration Kakuin, causing the flames to once again burn from his skin. He looked positively satanic as he asked the medical ninja, "Will you yield?" Kabuto's face betrayed his dismay. In response, he ran through the seals for his escape jutsu and disappeared. Keisuke dropped his seal and sighed. This whole mess was obviously far more complicated than he had thought. Even so, it didn't stop him from smiling as he turned to the kid and said, "Glad to see you're back in shape, kid. I've changed my opinion of you." The blonde boy flashed a foxy grin back at him. "You've changed my opinion, too, sunglasses freak. That was some pretty cool stuff out there." "I have a name, you know," Keisuke said, slight annoyance not breaking his smile. "It's Keisuke, not sunglasses freak. Hey, I'm the great Uzumaki Naruto-sama, the future Hokage. I'll call you whatever I want." Both of them just stared at each other for a time, staring each other down. Then it seemed that a mutual revelation occurred between the two, and both of their jaws dropped in surprise. Naruto's eyes grew wider than they had in months, and Keisuke's brows arched higher than they had in years. Uzumaki Naruto. Keisuke. Naruto, a bruised, battered, and winded Jiraiya, sporting numerous palm prints, made his way into the decimated copse of trees, carrying 2 packs, one of which he dropped by Naruto's side. "Naruto. I thought you got away from me for a minute there. I suppose I should have told you that I'd be out researching a bit late, should have given you something to do. Hey, Naruto, are you listening? I'm trying to apologize here." Jiraiya stared at the pair of them, waiting for them to speak as they sat with those astonished looks plastered on their faces like yellow on snow that a dog has just visited. "Hey, you guys. You look like you've just been visited by ghosts." Until recently, the man known as Jiraiya, the legendary Toad Sennin, had been proud to say that only once in his life had he come near to death. Admittedly, it was sort of pathetic that he had allowed a woman to beat him to within an inch of his life, but hey, Tsunade wasn't your normal woman. He thought he'd regained some measure of dignity by forcing the title of Hokage on her. However, for Jiraiya, dignity was an elusive and fickle thing, which was why the Toad Sennin had spent the last week in a hospital bed, unconscious, his dignity ground to dust once again. This time, a 14-year-old kid, his own apprentice, to boot, had beaten him into a sack of broken bones and bruised organs. He was awake now, but he suspected that he wouldn't be functioning normally for quite a while. Silently, he cursed the day that he had embraced the god of perversion. "Ah, are you awake now, Jiraiya-san?" The Toad Sennin's neck, thankfully, had not been critically injured, and so he was able to turn his head to see the man who sat beside his bed. He was tall, wore black and green, and sported a pair of dark sunglasses, though they were indoors and the curtains had been drawn over the windows. Jiraiya stirred the soup that had once been his brain. "Damn you, Kyuubi, Naruto." Then he found a name to match the face before him. Keisuke of the Grave. The man in sunglasses grinned. "I'm pleased to see you remembered. We last met maybe 4 years ago, and only briefly at that. If memory serves, then you are one of these 3 Sennin that people whisper about, right?" Jiraiya grunted in assent. Keisuke continued his questioning. "Naruto tells me that you are on an extended training journey, and that you're supposed to be supervising him, right?" This time Jiraiya spoke. "Yeah. Listen, my memory's a little hazy, what happened?" Keisuke nodded and launched into his tale. "You've been hospitalized for about 6 days now. You suffered 4 broken ribs, 2 broken legs, a compound fracture in your left arm, a concussion. You get the idea. Basically, Naruto steamrolled your ass." Jiraiya grimaced. "Yeah, I'll bet he did. I'm impressed that you're still alive, considering that you looked a little battered when you found us. Fruits of your research, maybe, Jiraiya?" Keisuke gave a small laugh. The Toad Sennin gave another grunt. "Get on with it, what did Naruto do?" Keisuke's face became very serious, making Jiraiya grimace again. "I'm not entirely sure myself, and Naruto-kun doesn't remember much. I'll tell you what I do know. Naruto was beyond angry that you had abandoned him to be captured for the sake of your perverted research, and attacked you. You were able to repel him easily for a while, but as Naruto became still angrier, I felt a dangerous chakra emanate from him, and his aura change, so that it seemed he wasn't himself anymore, but something wild and destructive, bent on your demise." Jiraiya felt the blood drain from his face, and he shivered a bit involuntarily. Kyuubi. Since when had Naruto been able to release that much of the demon's power? Keisuke's eyebrows arched in recognition. "I've heard that name. Naruto mentioned it when I asked him about his change in aura, but refused to go into detail about it. From what I've felt of it, I think it's probably a demonic power, but I want to hear it from you, his sensei. What is the chakra that Naruto used that day, and what is Kyuubi?" Realizing that it couldn't be helped, Jiraiya told him. "I see," said Keisuke, "that's a pretty serious burden on a young kid. You realize that this might end up going very, very wrong in a multitude of places, don't you?" "Yeah," grunted Jiraiya, "but I think, and Tsunade does as well, that the Yondaime knew what he was doing that night. Naruto hasn't let Kyuubi escape in all his 14 years, and we believe he has the strength and determination to hold him for a few decades more, if not for the rest of his life." "Well," said Keisuke, "it's good that somebody has faith in him. When I first met Naruto, there was hardly a soul in the world that would even look at him. I'm glad." Keisuke rose from his seat and began moving to the door. "I have as much faith in the kid as you do. I think I'll enjoy running around with you too." Jiraiya tried to raise his head from the pillow, but his spine protested, and he collapsed back onto it. His gasp of pain was out before he could stop it, and Keisuke's ear turned toward him. "Something wrong, Jiraiya-san?" he asked with a small smirk. "Hold it," Jiraiya grated, "you can't come with us. We don't have money to feed you, and having more people draws more attention, which we don't want." "Is that so?" Keisuke said. His smile became wide to a degree which made Jiraiya very, very uncomfortable. "If that's it, then I'll be leaving at once. Naruto asked me to deliver a message to the Godem Hokage." "All right," Jiraiya yelled, "you're in, just don't go to Tsunade with this. You definitely don't want to do that." Keisuke laughed and walked out the door. Or maybe, he thought, you don't want me to do that, Jiraiya? The bathtub was incredibly filthy. Then again, You'd expect it to be, with that kid running around sticking his nose in everywhere, Keisuke thought. Through his extended arms of chakra and the complete tuning out of his other senses, he could feel the parts where filth had adhered to the porcelain. They were large and numerous, and probably would have revolted Keisuke if he were able to see them. Fortunately, though, he wasn't. Concentrating, he wound a single thread around his right forearm, forming a small portion of his commanding seal. He left the rest of his arms extended into the bathtub so that they could continue to feel out his targets. Ensatsu Kakuin. Kasai. The seal glowed red and his right hand immolated itself in brilliant orange flame. After making sure that the fire wasn't in danger of lighting up the shower curtain or his clothing, Keisuke set his hand to the first blotch on the porcelain surface. It was difficult to find the right heat and intensity for his flame, at first, but he'd been practicing for a few years now. Within a minute, he had it, and the blotch began to burn away. Keisuke Ni-chan? What are you doing down there? Keisuke didn't withdraw his hand, but moved one of his arms over to confirm that the speaker was indeed Naruto. Hey, kid. Finally got bored of blasting stumps and rocks apart? Naruto grinned wide. No point in keeping it up, since I already have the technique down pat, he said. I can do the Rasengan one-handed now. He beamed with palpable pride, and Keisuke was sure that if he were any more full of himself, he might explode. Ah, well, let him enjoy his little victory. Not every day you master a complicated jutsu like that. Oi, did Ero Sennin try to run you off? Yeah, and he failed, just like you said he would. This Tsunade must be damn scary if he caved at the mere mention of her. Both men grinned, and Keisuke put a noticeable measure of enthusiasm to his work. It hadn't been long, but they were quickly growing into good friends. Perhaps the fact that Keisuke had given Jiraiya an extra kick while he'd been sleeping had won him more favor with the boy, but whatever the cause, Keisuke welcomed the kid's good favor. It wasn't often that one was able to befriend such a unique person. So, Keisuke Ni-chan, what are you doing down there? The hotel can clean its own bathrooms, ya know. I know they can, kid, but that's not all I'm doing. This is a little control exercise. Oh, really? How's that? Keisuke pushed his sunglasses back up on his face and wiped some sweat with his free hand. The Kakuin seal technique has to be pretty rigidly controlled, or it can be as dangerous for friendlies as it is for enemies. Cleaning the bathroom may look simple, but it's got a lot of value for training and control. If the fire is too intense, you'll damage the bathtub. Too mellow, and the best you'll do is make a dirty sludge. Hey, Keisuke, yeah, if you're trying to learn control so that you can kick a person's ass, then why are you training on mud? Isn't that kinda half-assed? Keisuke sighed. As entertaining as the kid was, Naruto had plenty of moments where his slow comprehension skills made him less than good company. Actually, Naruto, it's more effective than it looks. When you first learned Rasengan, which did you learn first? How to control the spin or how to blow stuff up with an overload of chakra? Naruto's aura went into a state that Keisuke recognized immediately, though he'd only known Naruto for a short while. Naruto's brain was actually working to put two and two together. After a while, he said, "You're right, I did learn to control the spin first. How do you know that, Keisuke Ni-chan?" Keisuke simply said, "Instinct." Anyway, practicing on dirt is underrated. Nobody cares if you burn it up, and power is easy to use once you've got control down. Granted, some techniques are meant to blow up big stuff, but most things can be mastered like this. Crawl before you learn to run, kid. Hey, I think I see what you mean, Ni-chan. Keisuke smiled. Naruto wasn't the brightest bulb in the world, but it seemed that he was starting to learn his lessons a little easier. At least, he was a far cry from the obscenely loud little kid he had met back in Konoha. Hey, Keisuke, think you could teach me how to do it? That seal thing? Now Keisuke stopped and drew his hand out, releasing the seal. He heaved a second sigh as the flames dissipated. He'd been anticipating this question, but still wasn't exactly sure how to answer it. He rose from the floor and walked outside the bathroom, motioning for Naruto to follow. Hey, I asked you a question, he said, and a confused frown spread on his face, but he followed without question. Keisuke endured his prodding and poking until they reached a seemingly deserted outcropping. The hospital where Jiraiya was now staying was up in a mountain township, bordered on one side by a forest where the inhabitants hunted, on two sides by barren rock and by a sheer cliff on the east side, from which one would definitely be expected to never return. They were now in a rocky field on the mountainous south side, and it was a safe bet that they would neither hurt anything nor be discovered while they were there. Turning to face Naruto, Keisuke reached an invisible arm towards the kid, brushing his shoulder. "Close your eyes, kid." "Why? Just do it." Naruto did so. "Can you feel that? Your right shoulder? It tickles," said Naruto. "Is that chakra?" "Yeah, it is. But you're 50 feet away from me." "Yep. So how are you making it reach that far?" Keisuke's face had a slightly distant look as he explained, "It's one of 64 arms of chakra that I can reach outside my body. Each arm starts at one of my inner coils tenketsus, and can reach about 60 feet out. They work just like a second set of inner chakra coils. They send chakra where I need it to go, when I want it to go there, but these are external and mobile, and so they can have more and different uses from the actual inner coils." Naruto just stared for a moment as he absorbed all of this, and Keisuke took his silence as invitation to continue. "Collectively, they're called the 64 ghostly arms. They're what I use to perform my Kakuin seals and some other useful techniques. It has a fair amount of limitations, so it's not all powerful, but it's definitely got a lot of utility, especially for someone who can't see. All those arms are great feelers." The blonde genin's aura perked up as he recognized the name of the skill he'd wanted to learn. "So, Keisuke, do you think I can learn it?" Keisuke's face betrayed nothing. "That's just it, kid. I don't know yet. The thing is, I'm the only one I know who's been able to use the ghostly arms since I learned to do it 7 years ago." "Huh? So, is it a Kekkei Genkai Jutsu? A bloodline limit?" "Like I said, I don't know. I'm the only one that I know who can do it, and neither of my sons could ever use it. For all I know, it could be an ability unique to me, or it could be something that anyone could learn. Or, as you say, it might be a blood limit. There's no way to tell." "Ah," whined Naruto, "but if Ni-chan had a blood limit, it would be really awesome." "Hey, buck up. We haven't ruled it out yet, kid, and I've still got more to say." "Huh? What? This might sound kind of far-fetched, but I only became aware that the arms even existed about a month after I met you in Konoha. After you let me borrow some of your blood." Naruto's aura took on a tinge of surprise, and then his gears started turning. "So, you're saying you got this power from me?" "It's only an idea," said Keisuke. "Normally, swapping blood with somebody who has a Kekkei Genkai doesn't get you a special ability. But I'm..." Keisuke trailed off, searching for the right words, "not one of those who fall in the normal category, and neither are you, really, having a demon in you. It could be that some abnormal quality in either your blood or mine made a power that was latent in you stick and flourish in me. Who knows, really? The odds don't favor it, but you just might actually have some kind of blood-specific jutsu." Keisuke felt Naruto's aura take on a determined tone as he came to a conclusion. "So, Keisuke Ni-chan," he said, "if my blood and my power stuck itself in you, then that makes us kinda like brothers, doesn't it?" Now it was Keisuke's turn to be surprised. He hadn't expected that at all. But, if you think about it, it does sort of make sense. Naruto pumped his fist in the air. "Alright. I'm going to learn this Ghost's 64th arm thing. Keisuke Ni-chan, let's give it a shot." Once again, Naruto's infectious energy got hold of Keisuke's mouthparts before Keisuke himself did. Crazy kid, he thought, never had a real family in all his life. Small wonder he's jumping at the chance to find a brother in me. I wonder how many brothers he's made at home. From behind a tall formation of rocks, the woman watched the two young men, white eyes narrow with focus, veins popping around their sockets. She had seen them enter the village, carrying the bloody pulp that was the legendary Toad Sennin to the local hospital. She had watched the young blonde loiter at ramen stalls and public parks all over town, making more noise than was polite and working himself half to death with his training. Occasionally, she had observed flashes of a chakra in him that was not his own, not even human. And now, she had witnessed this blind man demonstrate a manipulation of chakra that only the adult Hyuga could recognize and hadn't seen in 14 years. If what she had just seen was what she thought it was, then the main Hyuga clan needed to know immediately. Silently, she hastened away from the outcropping and back to the village, where her courier was ready. Hinata sank onto the stool at Ichiraku's and exhaled deeply before ordering a miso ramen. She had been coming here once or twice a week lately for various declared reasons. relaxing after a long day of training, unwinding after a mission, chatting with Ayame-san, trying out the new recipe that Ichiraku Tuchi-san had created. They were numerous, these excuses. Though in many cases, her interest in the new flavors was genuine and she really did enjoy talking to Ichiraku's daughter, and the ramen was often an effective relaxant, Hinata's original reason for coming here was always beneath it all, and from the way the kind ramen cook and his daughter flashed knowing looks in her direction whenever she walked in, it showed. Hinata missed him. She knew that he was in good hands with Jiraiya-sama, that he was working his hardest to become stronger, just like her, but still she missed him. And no matter how hard she tried to act like nothing was wrong, no matter how kindly her father had acted towards her after she became a chunin, no matter how hard her teammates and Kurenai-sensei tried to give her other things to think about, she couldn't stop herself from coming here to relive in her head all those things that he said and did that made her weak, made her strong, made her stutter and faint, and then made her rise against the odds to fight again. He was a part of her life that she could never shed, and though she could live on in his absence, there was a void in her that yearned to go back to the day he had left, and pull him back into it. And as Ayame put her order before her, she couldn't help but turn her thoughts to the less pleasant possibilities. The things that might go wrong, might make him want to never return, might make him want to rush after Uchiha Sasuke prematurely and get himself captured and tortured, or killed. Hinata mentally slapped herself, grabbed her chopsticks, and broke into her ramen. That wasn't going to happen. Naruto-kun wasn't that stupid, and even if he were, he'd persevere and find a way to win. At least, she hoped so. She thought so. Oh, look at me, she thought, worrying over terrible things that definitely won't happen, except they could. She stopped eating and put her head in her hands, trying to get a grip. Hinata-chan. Came a voice from behind her. What's wrong? You look really upset. Hinata turned in her seat and greeted the pink-haired medical ninja trainee respectfully. Konnichiwa, Sakura-san. You don't need to be so polite with me, Hinata-chan. We were classmates, remember? Hi, Sakura-chan. So, what's bothering you? Oh, nothing. Sakura grinned a little. It couldn't be. Naruto, could it? As Sakura had predicted, Hinata went red and stuttered. And not really. Yep, this shy girl was still in love with her blonde teammate. Right. And who else are you coming here to have naughty daydreams about? Kiba? Sakura knew that it was somewhat mean, but teasing Hinata over this was more than a little fun, and it was one way to get her talking truth. And no. Kiba-kun has nothing to do with. Okay, calm down, Hinata-chan. It was a joke. She watched as the blue-haired Hyuga huddled into herself and looked down at her unfinished ramen. Hinata's defenses were broken. Now was the time to strike at the heart of the problem. So, you really are worried about Naruto, then? Hinata sighed, resigning herself to her fate. No, I mean, I'm not worried about him, really. I know he'll be safe with one of the Sennin watching him, but... Sakura waited for her to finish. However tough she was physically, which, in recent times, was very, very tough, the girl was fragile when it came to Naruto, and patience was required if one was to get a coherent response. Sakura-chan. There are so many things that can go wrong and... What if he rushes into something and is killed or captured? What if he finds something outside the village that makes him want to stay outside? Or... What if he does come back and he isn't the same? Sakura suggested. Or worse yet, remains as dense as ever and never notices you? Hinata gave a nod. Sakura had hit it right on the head. I can empathize with you, Hinata. I know what it's like when someone important to you, who practically means the world to you, goes away to follow his own path, find his own strength. Indeed, she did know. The incident would be burned into her memory for as long as she lived. I know how it hurts. But I also know that, in the long run, there really isn't much you can do about it except fight through it. Hinata stared. Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura is like me. Of course, there isn't a day that goes by where I don't wonder where he is now, what he's going through, or if there was really anything I could have done differently, she went on, but what's done is done. If he ever returns to this village, forced or not, I'm not sure what will happen. If I never see him again, though, at least I'll die with the good memories of him that I still have. I can keep going on that, and... She paused, putting a hand on Hinata's shoulder. Naruto did promise that he'd bring him back. I think I can put a little faith in that. Naruto always keeps his promises. I stick to what I say and I don't change it, That's my Nindo. Hinata smiled, remembering that. Yes, Naruto did always keep his promises. If you ask me, he'll be the same old Naruto when he gets back, Sakura said. He'll be dense, sure. But then again, you've changed quite a bit, haven't you, Hinata-chan? Stronger, prettier. He'd have to be 10 times as stupid as he is not to notice you now. Hinata smiled. Arigato, Sakura-chan. Not a problem. Just remember that even though it hurts sometimes without him, it never hurts to have a little faith and to be grateful for what you've had in the past. As Sakura turned to leave, she said over her shoulder, and if he doesn't notice you at all when he gets back, I'll punch him into next century, the big idiot. That evening, Hyuga Hiyashi sat in his garden, reading a letter that had arrived from a contact in faraway lands. His 64 ghostly arms was, according to Keisuke, one of those techniques that required tremendous inner focus just to awaken it. To a blind man, who could not perceive the physical world around him and had no place to turn his mental gaze except inward, such focus might not have been terribly difficult to muster. However, to a 14-year-old prankster turned ninja, whose eyes and mouth were constantly open, it could turn out to be nigh impossible, as Naruto was in the process of finding out. Rog. Keisuke, they're not coming out. The blind man observed from about 10 yards away, feeling out Naruto's aura for signs of progress. So far he had caught none, but Keisuke wasn't near ready to give up yet. If Naruto could indeed use the 64 ghostly arms, then Keisuke would have the opportunity to teach him alongside Jiraiya, which, in light of the Arrow Sennin's recent mistakes, sounded like a pretty good idea. Easy, Naruto. We haven't even been at it for 20 minutes, you want to give up already? Hell no. Naruto said, I said I'd do this, and I'm not stopping till I get results. That's the way, kid. Keisuke nodded. This was the kind of spirit that he'd come to expect from the boy. Like his abundant energy, it was contagious. It made him want to see a success. Keep at it. It took me a month of blundering my way through all kinds of hellish terrain before those feelers sprouted, and I'm older than you are. We don't know how the age difference will affect the speed at which you can use this thing. Hey. You just watch, I'll make it work by next week. Keisuke smiled widely. You do that, Naruto, and I'll buy 30 bowls from Ichiraku's for you when we get home. Of course, that'll never happen, but it will be good incentive to focus harder. You're making it a bet, Ni-chan? Naruto asked. That's the same mistake Tsunade Ba-chan made. You sure you can afford it? Keisuke waited a moment before answering. Wasn't Tsunade the 5th Hokage? Naruto had won a bet with the strongest ninja in Konoha? He wondered if he should have been intimidated by Naruto's statement as he said, Sure I can. Are you going to practice or what? When he felt Naruto become more jubilant than he'd ever perceived, he began to feel as though he should have been. All right, Keisuke Ni-chan, you're going to be at the ramen stall all day when we get back. With that, he settled down onto the ground, eyes closed in deep concentration. Why'd I get the feeling that he's going to be right? Keisuke thought. Then he stopped worrying about whether or not his wallet would survive and put his attention back on the boy. Even if he did end up flat broke, it would be worth it if Naruto could learn to use this technique. Putting on a serious face, he returned to instructing Naruto. Tune out all your senses, and feel into yourself. The inner coil system is a hugely complex thing. Even if you searched it for years, you couldn't map it all. It will take time to find your tenketsus, and even more time to coax out the ghostly arms from them. Naruto didn't say anything. Whether he was focused on his inner coils, on thoughts of his free 30 bowls of ramen, or both, Keisuke could not tell. The master of the ghostly arms swept feelers over his aura, seeking out the places where his chakra was most concentrated, judging his progress, offering encouragement and guidance where he could. It was a tedious process, yet they continued it for several hours. For their separate reasons, both of them really wanted to see this work. Finally, when the sun sank below the horizon leaving them with no solid results, Keisuke called a halt. I think we can leave it at that today, Naruto. Naruto, having been silent in concentration for a record 7 hours, did not hesitate to voice his annoyance. Damn it, he said, I didn't get anywhere today. Like I said, kid, we don't have any idea how long it could take. The best you can do is to keep trying a little bit every day and hope that you find it. Naruto glanced up at the full moon. The white orb reflected in his blue eyes like an island of hope in an ocean of obstacles. As they approached the gates of the village, he vowed, I'll do better than that, he said. I'm gonna get this thing down in a week if it kills me. Keisuke chuckled a little. Well, hopefully it won't go quite that far, I'm sure there are people in Konoha that'd like to have you back someday. Ah, don't worry about it. If I can survive Ero Sennin's torture, I can survive anything. Hey, it's not that bad. Naruto spun around. The Toad Sennin stood before him, heavily bandaged but mobile. Beside him, Keisuke began to get a little nervous. Was Naruto anywhere near ready to forgive his supposed master? Ero Sennin. Naruto shouted. Who the hell do you think you are? Trying to pass off having my ass handed to me all day and every day, almost dying about 50 times, going weeks at a time without any food or sleep. You think you can pass that off as not that bad? Jiraiya, prideful moron that he was, countered. It was all for the sake of your training, Naruto. You just said you were ready to give your life for the sake of your training. Besides, haven't you been improving from all I've put you through? Aren't you stronger now than you were before we left? Naruto's voice was a low growl as he questioned, strong enough to take 7 sound on my own, no backup. Keisuke, knowing what was coming next, stepped aside. Hopefully, Jiraiya would just take his lumps this time. A dislocation was better than a week-long stay in the hospital any day. And, perverted though he was, the Toad Sennin was a fair instructor in ninjutsu, so Naruto would eventually regret killing him. The menacing chakra that was radiating off the boy, while much more mellow than last time, was certainly capable of doing a good deal of damage to the still tender Jiraiya. Well, Jiraiya said, not yet, obviously, but... Jiraiya-san. Keisuke interrupted him. What? Have the doctors cleared you for running yet? Well. Start running, Ero Sennin, growled the red-eyed blonde before him. And run he did. Keisuke heaved a sigh. Oh well, Jiraiya would be fine. Most of Naruto's anger over the incident was expended already. Soon enough, all would be forgiven. Hell, Naruto had only sprouted 1 tail. This time, not 4. Wait a minute, he thought. Those tails. He ran a feeler across Naruto's red chakra. Tail. As the boy moved after his half-dead sensei, just to make sure. He found what he was looking for. Keisuke's ghostly arm did not lie. The tail had the same signature as his own chakra arms. Grinning, the blind man followed after his young friend, eager to share with him this new breakthrough. Was Naruto pissed? Oh yes. Would Naruto kill Ero Sennin? Maybe. Could Ero Sennin run away fast enough? Hell no. Was Ero Sennin screwed? Definitely. Well, maybe not so screwed. He had made a good point after all. Naruto was many times the ninja that he had been back in Konoha. Hell, most of the time he didn't mind the training, and he was even nearly ready to forgive his big mistake in the hot spring town. But nobody, and I mean nobody, was going to treat Uzumaki Naruto that way and then act like it was no big deal. Screw letting up because he was hurt. Jiraiya would live, and Naruto would forgive him, but not without taking a good thumping. Get back here, you perverted old lump, he cried, following in his sensei's wake. That Ero Sennin was quick even with his bandages. Though the Kyuubi's chakra pumped through him, Naruto was having trouble keeping up as they dodged over roofs, through alleyways, under sewer grates, across the marketplace, and God only knows how many other places. Nevertheless, Naruto made a steady gain, and within 5 minutes, he was nearly on him. Then, as Jiraiya ducked under an aqueduct, and Naruto flew over it, the Kyuubi container lost sight of his perverted master. He attempted to find him again by smell, but failed. The pervert had washed his scent off in the aqueduct's waters. Cursing, he followed the aqueduct back into the heart of the village, but it was no good. He had lost him. Naruto was just about to give up and look for Keisuke when he heard screaming from a building to his left. Looking over, he noticed that the building was the local public bath. Naruto smiled. Ero Sennin would get his punishment after all. Bursting right into the women's side, he quickly located his sensei, up against a wall facing several very angry women, and promptly blew him through the roof. Satisfied, he turned and stomped out of the bathhouse, reveling in his brief triumph. His red chakra still burned in him as he stepped into the cool night air. He'd given Ero Sennin what he deserved, but it would be a while before he calmed down completely. He swept an old beer can off into the night with his chakra tail, and turned to walk back to the hotel room. He was halfway there when a kind voice interrupted his brooding. Still pissed, I see. That amazing chakra is such a giveaway for that particular emotion. Naruto faced Keisuke with annoyance still in his voice. Shut up. It's not like it isn't justified for me to be pissed. Keisuke grinned. I agree with you. Jiraiya-san is forgetful. We'll have to keep teaching him this lesson for a long time. Still, I don't think there will be much cause for anger when you hear what I've got to say. Oh really? Naruto spat on the ground, then say it. Toss that dumpster out of the way for me, would you? Naruto was too busy grousing over Ero Sennin to question him. With his tail, he reached behind him and flung the offending dumpster to the other end of the street. Keisuke nodded and settled against the wall. Thank you. Care to tell me how you did that? Did what? Moved that huge dumpster with your chakra. Naruto's annoyance increased. I reached my chakra out, put it behind the dumpster, and pried it away from the wall. How do you think I did it? Strange, Keisuke said. When I do it, it usually would take more than one of my chakra arms to move something that big. Maybe it's because you pumped most of the chakra into a single arm rather than spread it out evenly among the 64 of them? Now Naruto's anger drained away, the demon's chakra and the tail receding back into the seal from whence they came. If he had heard Keisuke right. Wait a minute, he said. You're saying that the tails that Kyuubi's chakra makes when I'm mad are actually those ghostly arm things? Are you jerking my chain? No, Keisuke said, I'm not playing around. I had a good feel of that tail there this time around. There's no mistake. Naruto gawked at Keisuke open-mouthed, making him look rather stupider than he actually was. After a few seconds, he shook it off, but he was still wide-eyed. This day was turning out to be more full of surprises than any other day that he had known. Well, that sucks. Why does it only work when I let Kyuubi's chakra out? It makes sense, actually, Keisuke continued. The essence of the 64 ghostly arms is finding your tenketsus and pushing the arms out into the air, where they can be manipulated almost like a second set of hands. I guess Kyuubi must have gotten bored in there and decided to pass the time by counting out your tenketsus. At some point, he probably figured out that he could extend his chakra through them. He probably twisted most of the arms together into thicker, shorter tails as his personal touch. Who knew that a demon could be so creative, Kid? Naruto, however, was chagrined rather than intrigued. Damn it, he said, this probably means that I'll have to get that stupid fox to teach me how to do it, and I've only ever talked to him when I was half dead. Ah, buck up, kid, Keisuke said. He put his arm over Naruto's shoulder reassuringly. When we started this, you didn't have a clue where to look for your power. Now, thanks to Jiraiya-san's infuriating you, you've got a lead. Naruto brightened a bit. Yeah, I guess Ero Sennin is good for something, at least. Keisuke smiled again. That's the way, kid. Get back to the hotel, I'll finish some things up out here and then follow you. I want to see you back at the field first thing tomorrow, so we can work on this. Naruto flashed a foxy grin of his own, saying, all right, Ni-chan. You're definitely going to owe me 30 bowls of ramen when we get home. As the kid moved off, Keisuke slapped his own forehead. Damn, forgot about that little detail. Maybe I should have waited a week. Then he stretched his free chakra arms to their full reach, confirmed the presence in the trees, and turned to face it. Hyuga Hiyoshi's request had been clear, but as Haruka saw the man called Keisuke turn towards her, her doubts about whether this was the best course of action resurfaced. If this man possessed the kind of power that she suspected he did, then was it wise to directly attack him so soon? If he wasn't a threat at the outset, then this would more than likely make him into one? Still, Haruka trusted Hiyoshi's judgment. She'd known him since her girlhood, and he'd proved to be a sound leader. Sure, he hadn't stopped the barbaric practice of putting cursed seals on the Branch family, but that wasn't her problem. She was an independent, living where no member of the main house could abuse the power. Clan politics didn't concern her anymore. What mattered was that Hiyoshi, whom she believed to be a capable leader, had asked her to do this for him. So it was that when the stranger turned his eyeless face in her direction, she didn't run or hide. Then the stranger spoke. You can come down from there now, he said, the kid's out of the way. Haruka did so, dropping from the tree and landing cat-like in a battle stance. The lower half of her face was masked, and her midnight hair was tied back out of her eyes, which were precisely the same shade as the moon above them. In her black bodysuit with her Byakugan active, She might have frightened away a common man simply by looking at him. Pity that the stranger was blind. Your aura is strange, Hyuga-san. Clarify your intentions, please. The blind man's voice was low and serious. Haruka hesitated. Hiyashi had advised her to strike without delay, to test his skill in its entirety, including defense against stealth attacks. However, the stranger had not only found her, but already identified her blood limit ability, so her stealth was scrapped. And if she was already pegged as a Hyuga, then attacking him without warning might send him back to Konoha for vengeance. She opted to oblige him. If you are Keisuke of the Grave, as I think you are, then my purpose is to test you, she said. Test me? Hyuga-san, what need of your clansmen's would compel you to that? We have observed you since your arrival here, she explained, and you have exhibited a power that you did not have when you visited Hiyashi-sama 7 years ago. If it is the same power that we believe it to be, then Hiyashi-sama has cause to believe that you may be a threat to the Hyuga clan in Konoha. He has asked me to confirm our suspicions in combat. Haruka didn't see any reason to lie to the man. She wasn't exactly telling him anything that he couldn't have figured out for himself, and lying to him might give him more reason to hunt her clansmen. The blind man nodded. I am grateful that you are being truthful with me. It's a quality that was absent in most of the last bunch of idiots that Hiyashi sent after me. Very well, he said, and removed his vest and overshirt. Haruka's Byakugan saw several more chakra arms, now free of the bulky cotton shirt, extend to join the ones that sprouted from his arms and legs. Sinking into his own stance, the man continued, I am Keisuke of the Grave, as you thought. Your truthfulness has earned you my respect, I'll fight you willingly. Silence reigned for a moment as the opponents sized each other up. Haruka's eyes allowed her to see what was invisible to the average human. The 64 ghostly arms that sprouted from the tenketsus in Keisuke's inner coils system. She could see him waving them around himself, feeling out the area, and watched as the nearest ones closed on her, marking out her position, feeling for changes in her aura that might give away an attack. It was as spectacular and alien-looking as she remembered it. And now, it was up to her to test it. There's no point in trying to fake him out, she thought. He'll feel through any bluff that I try easily. I can't be sure that the Hake Rokujuyan show will work, either. Those arms might just be a natural barrier for the tenketsus. The best chance I have is to outmaneuver him and try to strike directly from close range. Her opponent was also analyzing his chances. Her Byakugan eyes can see every move that my chakra arms make. Trap seals will be useless, and she'll have advanced warning of any Kakuin jutsus that I perform. Stealth and genjutsu is an exercise in futility here. I'll have to avoid the Juken as much as possible and overpower her. The stillness lasted several minutes. Then, Haruka saw him start to wrap some of his arms around himself, forming an elaborate seal. She didn't wait for him to finish, focusing chakra to her feet and charging him with Juken at the ready. His feelers caught the movement immediately, and he flung shuriken in her path. Though she avoided them easily, her dodging movement afforded him time to complete his seal. Ensatsu Kakuin. Raiko, commanding card seal, lightning. No visible change accompanied the activation of the Kakuin, but Haruka knew better than to charge in blindly without knowing the nature of the defense. She threw a set of kunai, which he dodged fluidly. However, his feelers didn't pick up the thin wire that she had wrapped around 2 of them, and without eyes, Keisuke had no other way of knowing about it. He dodged between them and ended up with his arms tied to his sides. Certain that whatever defense that he had was now disabled, Haruka charged a second time. Taking aim at Keisuke's right lung with her Byakugan, she readied a Juken strike. She was 30 feet away with no visible resistance. But when she came within 25 feet and he had positioned his chakra arms in a spiral pattern around him, she knew that something was amiss. She pulled out of her charge just as he leapt into the air and started spinning. Reikaden. Lightning spin. The crackling electrified whips that had once been ordinary chakra barely grazed her, but they still stung like hell. It was like being slapped by some overgrown jellyfish. She landed hard on the concrete and rolled to her feet. A modified Kaden. If he had waited just a little longer with that, I might have been seriously electrocuted, she thought. If he had waited, did he? She relaxed her stance. He'd started his Kaden early to give her a chance to pull out. You could have done me serious injury with that technique, she said. Why did you let me escape? Why did you wait until I understood that you wanted to fight before attacking? He countered. I was under the impression that this was merely a test. Why use lethal force in a test, especially when there could be civilians caught in the crossfire? Well, Haruka said, there are those among us who'd think you'd jump at the chance to slaughter a Hyuga. That's part of why I am here, to find out how threatening you might be to us. Keisuke frowned at her, dropping his Kakuin and straightening out of his battle stance. Hyuga-san, I'll be honest with you. There are individuals among your clan, like you, who are morally sound enough to earn my respect. But, as a rule, I don't like the Hyuga much. Haruka stiffened. She had noticed the way that his face had contorted in disgust as he finished that sentence. Obviously, he did not like the Hyuga at all, possibly even detested them. So, should I consider you a friend or an enemy? Turning away from her, Keisuke said, you and your clansmen are safe from me, Hyuga-san. I have no desire to associate with them at all. Without another word, he walked away. Haruka let him go. She had seen enough for now, and was busy deciphering what she had learned. She had accomplished her primary goal, and confirmed that the stranger was indeed the fabled Keisuke of the grave that had visited Hyuga Hiyashi. He was powerful, that was clear. She thought that in a real battle situation, away from civilians and with the advantages of stealth, she might have been able to best him, but in a fair fight it was clear that he was her superior. It also seemed true that he valued honesty and respected the rules of engagement. Other than that, though, Hyuga Haruka didn't know what to make of him. He might have been telling the truth when he'd said that her clansmen were safe, but from the way his face had shown utter contempt when he had spoken of them, she thought it possible that this might change very easily. She was once again at a loss, and decided that perhaps it would be best to consult Hiyashi again. She let her Byakugan fade and ran along the fence towards her apartment. After a minute's hard running, she let her mask fall and sighed. As she rounded a sharp corner, she wondered if Naruto was nearing the hotel room when he got the feeling that something wasn't all right. Reaching back, he found that the straps that had rested on his shoulders that morning were no longer there. Crap, I forgot that I dropped my pack when I chased after Ero Sennin. He groaned, and hopped onto the fence to head back into town. He was not happy at all. On top of everything else that had happened today, he was going to have to run all over the place trying to recover his gear. Naruto heaved a resigned sigh as he came around a sharp corner, inwardly wondering whether. Crack. Two heads that had been staring at their owner's feet as they pondered the events of the long day collided, and the dual concussion that resulted yielded two unconscious ninja. The streets that intersected at the scene of the crash were deserted this late at night. There were no witnesses, and the two were left to elements. Fortunately for them, their rescuer came within minutes. Unfortunately, their rescuer was a tired, beaten old man in torn bandages. Arg, Naruto, said the man, rubbing the back of his head and wincing, you'd better be grateful for this, dragging you back after all you put me through. With a pained grunt, Jiraiya slung the unconscious woman over his undamaged shoulder, and proceeded to drag the concussed Naruto back to the hotel. I'm sorry, Naruto, the Toad Sennin thought. I'll make sure you aren't neglected again. She walked the line between wakefulness and sleep for a long time, her thoughts and dreams so scattered as to shape her world into a semblance of the apocalypse. It was temporary, however, and soon she was crossing the line into consciousness, piecing together the thoughts that had been sent akimbo in her battered head. In a few moments, those thoughts took on coherence, and she remembered that she was Hyuga Haruka, an independent branch house member, and that she had been about to send a report to her longtime friend and clan head, Hiyashi. Feeling the throbbing in her forehead, she remembered that she'd had an accident on her way home. One important piece of information was still missing, however. Was she still where she had fallen, or had she been moved? Gritting her teeth against the pain, she opened her eyes to find out. Her eyes widened as she found herself staring into a fox-like face, whose most prominent features were the whisker-shaped birthmarks, the brilliance of its blue eyes, and the overbearing energy of the smile it was wearing. That grin only widened when the owner of the face saw that Haruka was awake. He turned his head and half shouted over his shoulder. Oi, Ero Sennin, she's awake. Haruka moved to sit up, and the boy, who she now recognized as Uzumaki Naruto, jailer of Kyubi, rose to his feet as he was joined by the third occupant of the room, who she immediately saw was the legendary Jiraiya. Her face concealed the surprise that she felt at waking up under the watch of these two. How had she ended up in the hotel room of the ninja she had been stalking all week? She didn't have to wait long for her answer, as the Uzumaki boy had opened his mouth again. "Ne-chan, are you okay? Ero Sennin found us after we hit each other on the fence. I'm pretty hard-headed," he said, rapping his own head in demonstration, "but I don't know you. Does it hurt a lot?" As he spoke, Haruka could see his apology. It was blatantly obvious in his body language. He seemed to deeply regret what his thick-skulled ness had inflicted. Haruka had, of course, been observing him since he'd arrived, but during that time she had seen only his determination for getting stronger, and his rage at his master's folly. Now, away from the rocky outcropping that he'd adopted for a training field, she was seeing another aspect of the annoyingly loud, dangerously powerful teenager. Was I unconscious a long time, to make him this worried, or is he naturally this considerate? If the latter were true, she may have needed to re-evaluate his level of threat to Konoha. However, even if he didn't want to destroy the village, he still had, as she had heard, openly vowed to change Hyuga, so she decided to reserve her judgment on Naruto for now. Her friend Hiyashi might still have a problem on his hands. Even so, she tucked this display of kindness into her memory. She'd definitely take it into consideration later. Before Haruka could answer the boy's questions, though, Jiraiya had asked his own. "It took me a while to recognize you, injured as I am, but now I'm positive. You're the Hyuga that I've seen flickering around after us all week. Am I mistaken?" The Toad Sennin's face was uncharacteristically neutral, though his tone carried a seriousness that to Haruka implied, "Don't lie to me. I know ninjutsu, and I mean really know it." Shifting her gaze from Jiraiya's detached mien to Naruto's suddenly curious one, she saw that she was left with little choice. Neither of them would like the truth, that was for sure, but she could potentially be in more trouble here if one of the Sennin guessed that she was lying. All Haruka could hope for, really, was that these two shared their companion's high regard for honest people. She proceeded to tell them everything that she knew of the situation, her reaction to their arrival, the manner in which she had informed Hiyashi, her concern at Naruto's frequent displays of demon power and the potential threat that she saw in him, Hiyashi's concern, maybe fear, about Keisuke of the Grave and the all-too-familiar power that he had obtained, and how Haruka had accepted his request to test him. She told them everything up until the point where her memory ended in the painful state that Jiraiya had found them in. Both men listened intently to the tale. When it ended, Jiraiya gave a small nod and a grunt, showing that he had believed the story. Naruto, however, still had questions. But, Haruka Ne-chan. Haruka was at a loss at this, since nobody had ever called her sister. Why would your clan head be afraid of Keisuke's Rokujuyan Ryude? I've never heard of it doing anything really destructive. Haruka was slightly taken aback. Has the Uzumaki boy been taught nothing of his father's past? Nonetheless, she did not hesitate in her answer. The power that Keisuke-san names the 64 ghostly arms is the power that, guided by a very skilled ninja, almost forced an end to the current Hyuga clan system of main and branch houses. Hiyashi probably thinks that if Keisuke-san gained the same mastery of it as that ninja did, then he would have both the means and the motivation to finish the job. Hiyashi is a longtime friend of mine, so I'm trying to do him a favor by keeping an eye or two on him, and on you. Naruto frowned. Okay, I understand that, he said, but you're a branch house member, right? Why would you be friends with the man who let that ugly seal get put on your forehead? Hiyashi wasn't clan head when I received the seal, Haruka replied, so my curse isn't really his fault. If it helps you to hear against the main house, my parents didn't like the system much. They took me out of the village, and we all became independents, completely free of all clan binds except the caged bird seal, which was there to prevent the Byakugan from falling into the hands of our enemies. I don't dabble in clan politics much. The rift between the houses doesn't concern me. The blonde demon vessel pondered a moment, and then voiced what seemed to be his final opinion. I like your parents, he said. Anyone that doesn't like the way the Hyuga clan runs is someone I can relate to. His foxy smile then lit up his face. I think I like you, too, Ne-chan. You don't hate the clan system, but you don't really support it either, so you're okay. And your eyes aren't cold like most people's. Reminds me of some friends back home. At this last remark, Haruka was once again surprised. Eyes aren't cold. It was then that she realized just what kind of person that Uzumaki Naruto was. The boy could have easily taken the hateful looks of the villagers around him and used them to fuel a demonic fury, destroying potentially half his home, and yet here he was, completely trusting a complete stranger who was a member, however detached, of a ninja clan that he apparently despised. Hell, he even likened her to some friends back home. Struck by a sudden curiosity, Haruka asked, "Naruto-kun, you have befriended Hyuga before?" Naruto broke out of his reverie with his grin plastered on his face. "Yep. Much as I don't like most of them, there are a few of them who aren't that bad." He looked out of the hotel window, into the light of the crescent moon. "I wonder how they are." Neji, Hinata. For somewhere on the order of 5 hours, the two Hyuga cousins had been trading blow after blow after blow. It was only practice, so the open palm Juken strikes had no force behind them, yet after 50 or so practice matches, both combatants were as winded and as bruised as though they had just come out of a particularly unruly mosh pit. The sun-parched earth beneath them was stained with sweat and scuffed up by two pairs of feet repeatedly scrambling to gain or maintain balance. The setting sun glinted on their plaited headbands as they fought to catch their breath, having just finished an unbelievably close sparring match. Normally, Hyuga Neji was nonplussed by this level of grueling activity. His teammate, Rock Lee, had a sort of neurotic obsession with intense physical strain, and made a point of dragging him out to their practice field for long sparring sessions, particularly when it was least convenient to him. As a result, extreme physical activity had long ceased to bother Neji, and after a while, he had begun to appreciate its value, his stamina having increased considerably. Since his promotion to Chunin rank, Neji had been forced to endure many challenging missions in rapid succession, and without Lee forcing him to work at his level, he might have exhausted himself already. When he was by himself, making use of one of his scarce resting periods, Neji contemplated the irony in this. Before his first failed Chunin examination, Neji had regarded Lee as a hyperactive, talentless fool, who was doomed to a fate of inferiority. Indeed, he had labeled quite a lot of people that way, his cousin Hinata included. Back then, strength and weakness, and the unbridgeable gap between them, was all he had been able to see. Then Neji had met Uzumaki Naruto, and had his blind arrogance handed to him on a silver platter. For the village fool to defeat the #1 strongest genin, the prodigy of the Hyuga clan. Unthinkable by Neji's old standards, and yet it had happened. On that day, his outlook on life, as well as his comrades, had begun to change. Rock Lee, youth-obsessed psychotic though he was a dependable and loyal teammate. Uzumaki Naruto, although loud and thick-headed, was a capable fighter and a fierce protector of those who didn't deserve harm. And his own cousin, Hyuga Hinata, despite her timidness, was one of the most determined people he had ever known. Though she had lost 39 of the 50 practice matches they had fought that afternoon and both of them were nearly dead on their feet, she had refused all of his beseeching to call it a day and go home. The old Hyuga Neji might have called it foolishness. Except that she had still won 11 matches. Considering that she had never beaten him even in practice in all his 14 years of knowing her, and that she had actually mustered the nerve to ask Neji to practice, it seemed that the Hinata that Neji knew was no more. She had improved beyond recognition and become something new. Something with a purpose. Something strong. After a few minutes, Neji had recovered enough to turn and start walking home, but before he had gone 3 paces, his cousin's normally forceless voice halted him. "Wait, Neji-ni-san." Though he would like to have done something very un-Neji-like and fall over in exasperation, he made the effort to turn and walk back. Though Hinata was quite obviously tapped out, she had returned, albeit shakily, to her ready stance. Her eyes were both determined and pleading as she said, "One more. Please, Neji-ni-san. One more, and then we'll go home." For a long moment, Neji stared at her. Then, with one of his rare smiles on his face, he also sank back into his stance. "As you wish, Hinata-sama. I will fight one more, and I thought only that idiot Lee could force me to this," he thought. "To convince me so easily, and with this new strength." When the sun had set and Hinata's 11 wins had become 12, Neji was ready to believe that perhaps there was a reason why she had been born the heir to the Hyuga. A sudden tumult of shouting and explosions drew Naruto and his companions out of the hotel and into the night which, only moments ago, had been dark and peaceful. While they had been talking, it had transformed into a nightmare. Shop windows were being smashed in, valuables were being looted, people were screaming into the streets from their burning homes, and animate corpses flitted through the night. Or at least, they looked like corpses. Taking a better look at one of them in the process of making off with a baker's early morning product, Naruto could see that they were really just men wearing cerements and smothered in dirt. They sure looked ghastly, but these were really just a bunch of freaks. They aren't shinobi, Jiraiya observed, tripping one of them and stepping on him for emphasis. Yeah, just a bunch of bastards in Halloween costumes, trying to scare people away from their stuff so they can make off with it, Naruto added, smashing another into the fence as he passed. Haruka's Byakugan was active, looking through the turmoil, but there's a lot of them, and they've spread through half of the village already. Naruto asked, but shouldn't the village guard have been able to handle a bunch of freaks like these? He grabbed one of them by the scruff of the neck and kicked him into a wall to punctuate his question. They've pinned down the village guard in their bunker. Well, that's not. Oi, Keisuke, Naruto had spotted his blind brother on a rooftop, squaring off against one of the brigands. Not hesitating, he leapt up towards them, Haruka and then Jiraiya following. On closer inspection, this particular pilferer was many times larger than any of his brethren, and possessed a height advantage of about 2 feet over Keisuke. And, unlike his fellows, he wore a set of armor made of bone chains. Immediately after they reached the rooftop, Keisuke felt them there and held out his arm in a halting gesture. Don't approach him, Keisuke called, straining to be heard over the pandemonium below. This one is a missing nin, and a juggernaut at that. As if on cue, the monstrous man swung a bone-adorned club at Keisuke's head. With a grunt, Keisuke dug in his heels and stopped it with both hands. Naruto did not retreat. What the hell kinda missing nin tries to fit himself into a little kid's Halloween costume? You be quiet, damned kid, snapped the victim of the verbal jab, unless you want to be dead. I know this man, Haruka interjected. He and his flunkies have been terrorizing the locals in this country for months now. I've stopped them where I could, but everyone that fell always was replaced by more. They're the Rotting Blood Gang, and if I am not mistaken, this is Daisuke of the Grave. That's true, Keisuke growled, teeth clenched as he fought to hold back Daisuke's club. Apparently the fool's been wanting to find me forever so that he could fight over who's worthier of the grave. Ridiculous, if you ask me. It isn't ridiculous, Daisuke bellowed, finally hurling Keisuke away. I'm the leader of the Rotting Blood, the man who perfected the art of bone weaponry. I need a title that reflects my style, and you are my rival for it. At this, Naruto, Keisuke, Jiraiya, and Haruka had put on very blank stares. It's really that important to him? Haruka asked inwardly. Bone weaponry, he's full of himself. That Kimimaro person did better. Way unoriginal, thought Naruto. Jiraiya was sweat dropping. He's just a larger, more sinister version of Maida Guy. Keisuke, however, was thinking, he's an oaf, that's for certain, but that just leads to his opponents underestimating him. He's a walking tank. I'm having far more trouble with him than I had with those sound nin. Right, he said, Naruto, Jiraiya-san. Let me help, Keisuke ni-chan. Naruto, it's no good. This one is enough trouble for me, and I don't need you biting off more than you can chew, especially with Jiraiya-san injured. But Keisuke, you're already losing. Indeed, Keisuke looked to be at a disadvantage. His clothing was torn in several places. There were bruises where the bone club and gauntlets had struck. There was a crack in one lens of his sunglasses, and Daisuke looked virtually unharmed. What if he's too much for you? Naruto, Jiraiya cut in, Keisuke is keeping him busy. Right now the rest of the gang below is being allowed to plunder at will. While Daisuke is occupied here, he will be unable to stop us from taking down his flunkies. Your energy is better spent down there. He pointed to the cluttered and burning streets below. He's right, Naruto-kun, added Haruka, you should go help Jiraiya-san deal with them. I'll stay and help Keisuke-san for you. For a moment, nobody spoke, but then Naruto agreed with a reluctant nod, gave a half-smile of thanks to Haruka, and turned away. Come on, Ero Sennin. There's bugs to swat. The two of them hopped downward, Jiraiya doing what he could within the limits of his injury, and Naruto full-out thrashing the disbelieving thieves with a small army of cage buncheons. Not moving from his ready poise facing the bone user, Keisuke addressed Haruka. Your offer of help is noted, he said. But since you considered me to be a possible threat, and because you are Hyuga, you'll understand if I decline it. His voice had a chill in it that was unlike him, even though he spoke with his serious, intimidating, battle voice. Haruka could hear it with crystal clarity. Keisuke did not trust her, and apparently for good reasons. Naruto-kun chose to trust me, she said, though he knows my purpose. He's proved to me that he isn't a monster, and I've decided to withhold judgment on you as well. I trust Naruto with my life, Keisuke replied, but I generally don't trust his judgments. He's got a few more years of maturing to do, after all. As for you, I said before, I have no love for the Hyuga, and I don't have any way of knowing that you won't stab me in the back. Once again, Haruka hid her exasperation. True, Keisuke probably had a reason to hate her clan, but why would she have any reason to offer help and then betray him? She barely knew anything about Keisuke. It was too early to make such a rash decision as to kill him. Still, the more Keisuke thrust her into his Hyuga stereotype, the more she felt like doing just that. Meanwhile, Daisuke had been growing impatient. Finally, it seemed as though he could wait no longer, and charged Keisuke with his humongous club. Keisuke evaded it and landed squarely on the next rooftop over. "Hello, I'm trying to prove something here," roared the bone user. "How can I seriously say that I'm the one truly deserving of the rights to the grave if I just smash you while you are chatting away idly with some interfering broad?" Said interfering broad came running towards the huge man, Byakugan activating on the fly, ready to strike. Her charge was cut short, however, by a blast of cold from beneath her feet. Haruka was stopped in her tracks as the water vapor in the air quickly condensed and then froze around her feet and legs, trapping her, but leaving her unharmed. Damn it, she thought. Keisuke had planted a trap seal with his 64 arms technique in anticipation of her attack, and with her Byakugan not active, she had failed to notice it until it had sprung. The two combatants ignored her as she fought to break free. "You know, I really don't see what's so important about it," Keisuke said. "My title doesn't matter to me much at all. It was given to me by my peers, not invented." As Daisuke seemed to grow more and more furious, Keisuke thought a little more provocation was in order. If he could get the bone user good and mad, he might not need any help to slip in a killing blow through his anger clumsified defenses. Putting on a maniacal grin, Keisuke said, "And they certainly didn't call me Keisuke of the grave because I survived the horror of squeezing my overinflated head into some child's Halloween costume." Keisuke's jibe had the intended effect. Daisuke was enveloped in full-blown rage as he charged again, club held high. Keisuke sidestepped the blow, leapt up and kicked the bone user in the back of the head, using the rebound to sail back to the first rooftop as his opponent crashed into the stone. Oof, he thought. However, he shouldn't have been thinking, as Daisuke had risen again, apparently not damaged, to strike once more. The oaf had some really effective armor and an inhuman amount of stamina. Keisuke could dodge these clumsy attacks all day long, but the bone-wearing tank could absorb anything that he could dish out and come back without hesitating. If Keisuke did not think of a way to inflict some damage, Daisuke would outlast him. Fortunately, Keisuke had had some education down in Orochimaru's freezing dungeon labs. Dried bones were of the type of material that shattered easily when it was cold. It may have been a long shot, but Keisuke had no other bright ideas. In Satsu Kakuin, Shimo, commanding carved seal, Frost. 16 of his remaining 60 ghostly arms, 4 of them having been consumed to make the trap which imprisoned Haruka, wrapped into his skin, and the shining blue seal took form. The air became cold around him, and his exhaled breath became visible. He was cold incarnate. Now he would put Daisuke's bone armor to the test. As the hefty bone tank's club came sweeping at his left side, Keisuke ducked underneath and delivered a hard kick at Daisuke's side. Some of the bone links chipped, but the kick did not so much as make Daisuke flinch. Not waiting for the next swing, Keisuke tried again, aiming a frosty punch at his opponent's gut. He got the same result, with the added misfortune of having placed himself directly in the path of Daisuke's next swing. They might have been easy to evade for a skilled ninja, but those heavy blows were not pleasant to feel when they actually landed. Keisuke went sailing back into the same crater that Daisuke had made with his armored weight in the other roof. Winded and bleeding, but not finished, he climbed to his feet and watched Daisuke bellow in triumph at his good hit. The icy blows were more effective against the bone armor than his normal blows, but they still did not do nearly enough damage. Daisuke still didn't have a scratch on him. Gritting his teeth, Keisuke made a decision that he hadn't had to make in a very long time. It would cost him a large chunk of his combat capability. But, if it worked, Daisuke would be eating rock splinters. Keisuke vaulted back to the original roof, leapt over the low sweep of the club, and slammed his open palm into Daisuke's chest. Kakuin release, Shimo no Bandingu, carved seal release, binding of frost. He felt the ghostly arms of his Kakuin rip off from him, detaching from their formation on his skin and wrapping onto the bone-bedecked behemoth in the reverse formation. This done, Keisuke dodged the overhead club strike and leapt away, repositioning. He had to attack immediately. Those arms were working their magic on Daisuke, the inverted Kakuin supercooling the target himself rather than the air around him as the original Kakuin did. Yet they were cut off from Keisuke's chakra now. Soon they would cease to function, and Daisuke would shake off the cold that was restricting his movements and be all over him again. Keisuke was down to 44 ghostly arms, barely enough to form a Kakuin and still have enough left over to feel out his environment. He could not do another trap seal or binding without sacrificing either power or perception. For this effort, however, it sufficed. He wrote a different seal on himself, one that shone with brilliant white. Ryoku no Kakuin. Carved seal of power. With his joints stiff from cold and his armor brittle, there was no way for Daisuke to evade or withstand the impact of Keisuke's Kakuin-powered fist. The bone chestpiece blew apart and the blow connected just beneath its wearer's sternum, sending Daisuke of the grave plowing into the stone floor of the plaza below. Keisuke swept an arm quickly over the fallen bone user. To his perceptions, there was no question that he was dead. Poor fool's weight finally killed him, falling from that height, he thought. He released his Kakuin and turned to the captive Haruka. Now then, he said, let's discuss. Behind you, she shouted. Keisuke didn't have time to feel out the solid mass that slammed into his back, sending him crashing into Haruka, who was knocked free from her icy shackles and tumbled with Keisuke into a nearby wall. Keisuke felt a couple of ribs snap. Haruka, who was partially cushioned against the impact by his chest, was healthier. Well, she said as she extricated herself, you'll have a difficult time finishing the battle this way. She indicated his broken ribs, which her Byakugan saw without hindrance. When Keisuke only grunted, she spoke again. You know that I have no reason to kill you, yet. Is your hatred for Hyuga too strong, or are you finally ready to try trusting me? Keisuke was silent as he struggled into a kneeling position. Haruka pressed for an answer. He has a powerful genjutsu which allows him to feign death too completely for a wave of your feelers to detect. Other than his obscene stamina, it looks like the only thing that qualifies him as a ninja. But he can't fool my eyes. Do you want my help or don't you? Daisuke landed on the street 50 yards away and started walking towards them. There was murder in his eyes. Hesitating only a moment longer, Keisuke finally assented. If you must. Haruka nodded. At last, it seemed, they were breaking through Keisuke's stereotyping habit. Stay here, she said. You removed his armor, but he's still thick-skinned. My Juken will punch through that. Just stay out of the way so you don't aggravate that injury. I'll stay right here, Keisuke said, but if you think I'm letting you take all the glory, you're wrong. As he spoke, Haruka saw several of his ghostly arms move toward her. They hovered near her tenketsus, and as Haruka felt a pressure from them, she was surprised as she realized that they were trying to force their way into her chakra coil system. Let them in, Keisuke said. Surrender to them. Haruka quailed for a moment, shocked at the prospect of the invasive arms. Then she recovered herself and set her jaw in determination. Keisuke had taken long enough to trust her. Why should she sink to his level by taking just as long? Resolutely, she took a deep breath and relaxed. Then the arms pushed into her tenketsus, and her world was expanded. Haruka found that she could feel everything that Keisuke could. The ghostly arms that were not connected to her brushed over objects around them, and she could feel them as though she had touched them with her own hand. She did not control the arms. That, apparently, was still Keisuke's department. But she had access to all of the information that Keisuke absorbed through his senses. As she became more aware of the connection, Haruka also found that she had access to Keisuke's reserves of chakra. They were waiting, untapped, within his body, ready to be used by either of them at a moment's notice. Nice, isn't it? Keisuke said, smirking. It's not something I get to do very often, as most people object to having me stick things in them. But the synchronization technique is very nice when I can use it. This is one of the only times that I can have access to eyes. How fortunate that you have such good ones, EH.
Haruka had to agree that it was very nice, though the invasiveness was unpleasant at first. Having that extra set of feelers in addition to the Byakugan made her feel as though nothing in the world could hide from her, and the access to that extra chakra was very comforting.
It has some limitations. If you move too far from me, the connection will break, and if you aren't careful, you might drain more chakra from me than is healthy. But I trust with the Hyuga's exceptional chakra control, that shouldn't be a problem, should it? Haruka ignored the bitterness in his tone. For now, she concentrated on the tank in the shredded armor lumbering toward her. Idle chatter again, EH, he said, shaking his large head. And now the broad is going to fight? Keisuke, you are unworthy of the grave. Yet, for the purpose of sport, I will oblige you.
And Daisuke charged Haruka, club Ed back for a crushing blow. Unable to stray from Keisuke due to the leash provided by the synchronization technique, Haruka did not rush to meet the charge, but waited in a ready stance for the attack to come. But Daisuke, with his rage now diminished some, was no longer attacking blindly and head-on. Stopping 10 feet short of her, he dug his club into the street and flung heavy chunks of rock at her in one of his rare instances of brilliance.
This was a folly, however. Between Keisuke's feelers and her Byakugan, not a single rock could escape her notice. Though she could have easily dodged or blocked all of them, Haruka decided that the brute might respond better to a show of more force. Drawing on both Keisuke's chakra and her own, she flung herself into a rapid spin. Hake Sho Kaden. Fueled by two sources of chakra, the swirling force not only crumbled the rocks, but reached out to knock Daisuke off of his feet. He skidded to a halt 30 feet away and fought to rise, but by the time he had climbed shakily to his feet again, Haruka's open palm drove a doubly powerful bolt of chakra into his abdominal cavity. Daisuke reeled as his innards rattled and squirmed in his body, and Haruka smiled in her victory. Haruka's eyes confirmed it. Daisuke was not going to be fighting for a long time. Deactivating her Byakugan and closing Keisuke's arms out of her tenketsus, she turned to walk back to the blind man, intending to give him an exultant, "I told you so." In doing so, however, she opened herself to Daisuke's final act of desperation.
"You," rumbled the bone user, blood streaming from his mouth, "you will." Haruka gasped in shock. Shit, why the hell hasn't he collapsed yet? She struggled for freedom, but the giant's meaty, bloody hands did not relinquish their hold.
Hitoshirezu Shinto no Jutsu, hidden concussion technique. A kunai embedded itself in Daisuke's leg. The bone user had only enough time to blink before it detonated in a flash of brilliance, the chakra that Keisuke had compacted into it releasing itself violently. Daisuke, formerly of the grave, fell to the ground, his left leg reduced to a minced scrap of meat.
Haruka landed facing Keisuke, glaring at him with a look that said, "Why didn't you warn me?" Keisuke smiled. "Behind you, Hyuga-san." Haruka nearly fell on her face. "A little late for that now, don't you think?"
"Well, I didn't have much of an advance warning, either. We can call it even now, I think." Haruka was about to protest that it was most definitely not even when Uzumaki Naruto dropped between them from the roof above, carrying a filth-ridden brigand under each arm. His grin was wide as he set them down, giving one of them a final kick to silence his struggles.
"Haruka-ne-chan, that was awesome. I saw that last part while I was bringing down these two. I never saw a Kaden like that, even from Neji. Where did you learn to do it?" She could have taken more credit than she deserved, and wanted to after letting Keisuke imprison and then trick her, but she had some measure of modesty, so she resisted the temptation. "Actually, Naruto-kun, I had a bit of help." Naruto smiled wider. "Hee, yeah, I saw Keisuke do that shock wave thing with the kunai, too. You guys make an awesome team, Keisuke-ni-chan, Haruka-ne-chan." Remembering the synchronization, Haruka had to agree that there were few times when she had felt that powerful. "If you're done lavishing praise, Naruto, do you think you might be able to give me a leg up here? I may be joining Jiraiya-san on the sidelines for a while." Naruto gave a hearty laugh and walked over to support his blind brother. As they moved off into the night to help clean up the wreckage, Keisuke turned his eyeless stare towards Haruka. His sunglasses had been blown away during the battle, and his empty sockets now regarded her with more expressiveness than she thought possible. After a while, he opened his mouth. "Haruka-san," he said, "thank you. I had my doubts, but I'm ready to believe that you are an honorable person. I'm sorry for my earlier behavior." A wave of satisfaction washed over Haruka. What she wanted to say was, "It's about time, you overgeneralizing bastard." What she did say was, "I accept your apology. I'm ready to believe that you also have some sense of honor. Depart with my favor. I'll tell Hiashi that you are not a threat." "Haruka-san, won't you come with us?" Jiraiya stepped out from behind a collapsed section of wall. "There is plenty of room in our company for one more, and I'm sure that Hiashi would agree that it would be wise to keep more eyes on these two, nay." "Hey," Keisuke said, "where was all the enthusiasm when I wanted to come along?"
"It's 'cause Haruka's a woman, Ni-chan," Naruto said. "We all know Ero Sennin's real reason for wanting her around."
Jiraiya whacked his head, cutting him off. "Quiet, Naruto, and who's an Ero Sennin?" Haruka couldn't help but grin a little at that. Their energy was just much too catching. "Jiraiya-san," she said, "I think I'd like that. I've been here for 13 years. Maybe it's time that I moved on." "And why not move on with our motley crew, huh?" Jiraiya said. He gave his own impression of the nice guy pose. Naruto returned Ero Sennin's punch to the head. Keisuke sulked a little bit but was too tired to complain. Haruka's smile broadened, and the four of them walked, or in Keisuke and Jiraiya's case, hobbled back to the hotel. They had proven their worth this night. On the horizon, the sun brought their morning upon them. Once again, the exquisite taste of the miso ramen performed its magical restoration upon Uzumaki Naruto. Ramen was his oldest friend, his most reliable source of solace in the world since he had learned to eat it. "But you're not my only friend anymore, are you, Miso?" thought the blonde genin happily. "I've got friends in Konoha, allies in Suna, in Wave, in Waterfall, in Snow and Bird and Tea. Hell, I even managed to find some out here in Nowhere Land. Even better, Keisuke Ni-chan and Haruka Ne-chan are great training partners. So good, in fact, that Naruto had been spending most of his time pestering them to practice with him, even causing Keisuke to almost collapse in exhaustion on a few occasions. While Keisuke may not have liked it much, Naruto was having the time of his life, improving to the point where he almost didn't know himself. His mastery of Kage Bunshin was such that he had been able to make one clone withstand a direct Juken strike on 1 or 2 occasions, and even the combined detection skills of Haruka and Keisuke could never tell which one was the true Naruto anymore. He was able to call up Rasengan almost at will, to the downfall of many rocks and logs taking the place of Keisuke through Kawarimi no Jutsu. He was growing ever more skilled at recognizing the correct move for a specific situation. And, most notably, Haruka's Byakugan had helped him to find his Tenketsu points and awaken his own Rokujin Ryude, at which Keisuke had been both magnificently proud and sorely chagrined, knowing that he was going to be buying a large amount of ramen when he returned to Konoha. While this opened up a whole new range of possibilities for Naruto, Jiraiya was nearly back to his full health, meaning that the grueling cycle of pain and gain would soon resume. However, Keisuke had promised him that they would find time to work on it, and Naruto had faith in that, at least. So it was that he found himself in a local ramen restaurant, contemplating his new strength. He would improve this power and become stronger. Then he would bring back Sasuke Tem from that bastard, the Snake Sennin. And when that was done, he and Sakura would wipe out Itachi and Akatsuki so that Sasuke would never abandon the village again. Naruto knew that this wasn't an easy goal. There wasn't a day that went by when he didn't imagine himself or someone he knew getting hurt or killed on this redemptive, retributive crusade. However, this was what he had vowed to do, and because he was Uzumaki Naruto, he would see that it was done even if he had to crush his own heart and soul to do it.
Hopefully, though, that wouldn't happen. After all, when all this was done, there was still the Hokage name to earn. And now he had even more reason to see the Hyuga clan reformed. Besides creating a better world for his friends Hinata and Neji, Haruka Ne-chan was nice. It wouldn't make him happy if she had to live with that kind of system. This also wouldn't be easy, but Naruto knew that accomplishing it would yield a powerful satisfaction.
The doors were wide open now. Uzumaki Naruto was about to walk through them, with style.
Normally, Keisuke was not the brooding type, but recent developments had shattered his hold on his high spirits, so now he was brooding on the rooftop of the hotel.
His brown hair, untended since departing his old hot spring home, had erupted into a wild, shaggy mane that was threatening to reach the junction of his shoulders and neck. 2 or 3 new scars had etched themselves into his arm and torso. The orange light of the sunset gleamed on his new sunglasses, and his brows were contracted as though he was squinting. He had no need to squint because of the sun, of course, he did so in concentration.
Keisuke had been witness to wonders in this past month. Some of them had annoyed him to the point where he wanted to head up some remote mountain and break things for a few days. Some of them had so astounded him that he had, for the first time since unlocking the very convenient 64 ghostly arms, wished that he possessed eyeballs. And then there were plenty that raised questions that even now were making his head hurt. For all this, however, Keisuke believed that the good aspects of his new existence outweighed the bad. Naruto, despite being obnoxious and stubborn, as well as an unstable demon container, was a fiercely loyal and dependable friend, and Keisuke had noticed that even his obnoxiousness was declining by degrees. Keisuke was more than glad to be his surrogate big brother, and was looking forward to teaching Naruto all that he could about their mutual power between Jiraiya's lessons. Jiraiya himself, while hopelessly perverted, was a mostly competent instructor and an excellent source of amusement for Keisuke whenever he had his little misadventures with women. Haruka, though she had developed a habit of teasing and criticizing him over the last few days, vengeance for Keisuke's prior misdemeanors towards her, no doubt, was also shaping up to be a worthwhile companion and practice partner, whenever Keisuke could extricate himself from Naruto.
She had agility that put him to shame, and chakra control that made him wonder whether she was hiding her own set of ghostly arms someplace. After a few matches, Keisuke had even begun losing to her about 1 out of every 3 times. It hurt his pride a little the first time, and Haruka, of course, had rubbed it in, but he had long since gotten used to being bested by her. After all, 2 wins of 3 isn't half bad. They had tried the synchronization a few more times, as well, and their cohesion in this state made even Jiraiya flinch. When Naruto had suggested that Ero Sennin try to take them on, the Toad Hermit had backed out, to go take the meds, which by that time he had thrown away. They'd all had a chuckle over that incident.
These were good times, that was for sure, but was it what Keisuke really wanted to be doing? When he had awakened in his tomb and escaped the Serpent's Lair 7 years ago, he had had only 2 things that mattered in his sightless world: pain, and the determination to find and exterminate the demon that allowed him to wake up to that pain. This drive had halted momentarily when he'd reached Konoha and met Naruto the first time, learning that there was more than pain left in the world. But then the drive had renewed itself when he had discovered what had become of the Hyuga, children of his child. Keisuke had set out from Konoha that day with the purpose of finding his old tormentor. It was a purpose that was never fulfilled, though, and he had gradually slowed down his constant travel to savor the flavor of the places he went, to drink in the evidence of continued happy mortal life in the world. In short, he had been seeking this demon for so long without any success that he had grown placid. Now that he was on the move again, his old personal crusade had re-entered his mind, gnawing on the toes of his new happy thoughts. Should he resume the search? For a long time, he sat and turned it over in his head before coming to his decision. "What is it that's really important to me right now?" he asked. His answer was a blunt kunai that would have struck him if one of his feelers hadn't caught it 5 feet away and triggered his dodging reflex. Climbing to his feet, he stretched his arms for perception and found Haruka standing 30 yards away. "Behind you, Keisuke-san," she intoned with a smirk. They had been trading playful rear surprise attacks back and forth since the Daisuke incident. "Naruto-kun wanted to know if you'd be joining him tonight by the river at the usual time. He wants to go over his altered Ryude formation, but he worries that he may have overdone it this morning and wants to know if you're up for it." Keisuke could read the teasing attitude in her aura and the tone of her voice as he dusted himself off, but he wasn't up for playing her game at the moment. Unfortunately, Haruka's eyes were not anything special at the moment, so she failed to understand that. Still smirking, Haruka said, "So, are you going to make it, blind man? Or do you need to lean on my vision again?" Sighing, Keisuke gave in to the abuse. "I don't think so, Hyuga. As I recall, the last time I synchronized for your vision, you cut it off abruptly and let me fall 50 feet before I could get my arms untangled to feel around again. That's what happens when you use up all those arms for seals. Wasn't that the whole point of the exercise, to see how effective the Kokuin could be if I didn't have to save any arms for perception?
Well, you could have tried a little harder to stay in range for the sink.
The same is true of you. No, it isn't. I had a rock face on that side of me. Exasperated, Keisuke thrust his hands into his pockets. Fine, you win today. I'm not in the mood. Haruka frowned. Oh, don't give me that excuse. I know you've got plenty of futile argument left in you. Keisuke shrugged and moved to the edge of the roof, nevertheless. All right, so you really are in a sour mood, said Haruka. Well, your reflexes are fine, so you shouldn't have a problem meeting Naruto-kun this evening. I'll tell him that you will be there as planned. In response, Keisuke gave a nod. Haruka nodded back. I expect you to come back in a better mood. If Naruto-kun's attitude doesn't put a spark back in you, then maybe I will have a monster to hand over to Hiyashi. Nothing human can keep moping around with that kind of energy nearby. With that, she left. Keisuke, however, remained on the roof a moment longer. That's right, he thought, I have a brother to live for. Old demons weren't important now, if they even existed anymore. Naruto had a concrete path ahead of him with clear checkpoints and a defined goal at its end, while Keisuke's old crusade had no established direction and no end in sight. And Naruto was youthful and exuberant, fun to be around, while Keisuke's solitary journey had been a thoroughly depressing experience by comparison. And all of this aside, Keisuke still owed Naruto for the blood that had granted him his life and new power to live it with. As Keisuke leapt from the roof into the sunset and headed towards the river, he also started down the new road of his life, the one that ran parallel to that of the blonde, orange-clad Hokage to be whose life's blood he carried in his veins. Hyuga Hiyashi sat once again in his home, looking slightly perplexed and holding a letter from his contact on the outside. It was much briefer this time. Hiyashi-sama, the Kyuubi container and his party present no obvious danger. I am pursuing them. Haruka, the legendary Toad Sennin, removed the last of his bandages and sprang to his feet. He grinned. Everything seemed to be in perfect working order now. Good. Now we can get back to what we came out here to do.
That wouldn't be paying another visit to the bathhouse and leaving Naruto exposed again, would it, Jiraiya?
The mighty Toad Sennin quailed beneath the second voice in his head. Little known among the common folk, Jiraiya had a conscience, which he was normally blind to, that liked to rear its head after an escape from a particularly bad misadventure. The name of that conscience? Tsunade, Godem Hokage-sama. No, Jiraiya definitely would not be making that particular mistake again. Orochimaru sat upon his high-backed chair and pondered the news that he had received. He had thought his old blind test subject to be no more. 7 years ago he had declined to pursue Keisuke because he felt it would be best to let the poor fool suffer and die in the wilderness and be consumed by beasts so that he could not be traced back to Orochimaru's facility. More pain for his escapee, no gain for his enemies. But the blind man had not died, and now he was in league with the demon vessel that had sworn on his life to take his container away from him. To make matters worse, both of them were now under the protection of his old teammate, Jiraiya, who must surely be on his best guard now. Therefore, killing him was not possible at the moment. And it had turned out that both the blind man and the demon vessel were developing a power that neither had ever shown before, and which Kabuto had been unable to gauge the full potential of, if this were allowed to continue. And stretched, readying themselves for the hunt. On the well-worn trail wending east towards the sunrise, 3 travelers had packed their tents, broken their fast, and begun the last leg of their journey. Among their number walked a tall teenager with spiky blonde hair clad in an orange and black jumpsuit, a taller man with short-cropped brown hair wearing black and green with mirrored sunglasses, and an older, muscular man in red. All of them were weary and rugged from their travels, but all had grins on their faces. Today's the day, isn't it? It was not a question, but a reiteration of fact that the teenager spoke. Yeah, it is, replied the old ninja. We'll reach Konoha by noon today. Plenty of time to see Tsunade and get reacquainted with the village.
The man in sunglasses smiled broadly. Oh, if I know my little brother, here, he said, indicating the exuberant blonde kid at the front of the pack, he'll want to skip straight to the reacquainting. Hey, you know me almost too well, Keisuke, said the little brother in question. It wouldn't be a proper reunion if the great Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's #1 loudest ninja, didn't make migraine-inducing light and noise upon entry. Keisuke laughed a little. No, I don't suppose it would. Just don't give any senile old fools a heart attack this early in the day. The older man huffed. And which senile fool might you be implying, Keisuke?
No one in particular, Jiraiya. Naruto couldn't resist snickering a little.
Everyone present knew that Keisuke had been referring to an incident that had taken place 3 weeks ago, when Jiraiya had announced that they were going home. The old hermit had retired to his usual research, to find an incredible harem already awaiting him on the men's side of the bath. However, no sooner had he fallen under the spell, than he was snapped back to reality, in which he learned that the harem was a masterfully crafted illusion developed by Naruto, with the help of Keisuke and, oddly enough, Haruka, and that the objects he had been groping were, in fact, a rock and an elderly man's right buttock. The resulting spasms that Jiraiya had exhibited had borne remarkable resemblance to the symptoms of an actual heart attack. Don't worry about it, Keisuke, Naruto said. I'm smart enough to know there's a time and place for that kind of jutsu. Konoha's perverts are safe. For now, he added silently, knowing that he'd have many opportunities to give the freaks what was coming to them later.
Kind of a shame, though, he said. Haruka Ne-chan is going to miss all the reunion fun.
She'll be along in good time, Keisuke assured him, as soon as she finishes her business in Suna. That Suna business again, Naruto thought. Do you really think that the Akatsuki are going to target Gaara? They'd have to be pretty confident to take on an entire ninja village by themselves. Jiraiya grunted. If they are, then we need to know. If they have enough power to take Sabaku no Gaara, then they probably have enough power to try to take me, Naruto finished with a sigh. I've heard it about, 4 times now. It's getting on my nerves. This definitely wasn't Naruto's favorite conversational topic. At the moment, he wanted to focus on all the fun he was going to have shocking his old friends with his explosive reappearance. I'm more worried about Haruka Ne-chan. Haruka's a strong woman. Akatsuki or not, she'll find us, and she'll bring the information we need with her. Keisuke's tone was level and serious as he said this. Naruto's eyes, however, had a mischievous gleam to them that erased any trace of seriousness from the situation. Strong woman, Keisuke. She must have beat you good that last round if you're praising her. She won't believe me when I tell her. Keisuke's face flushed a little. Geez. Look, Naruto, I'll buy you 10 bowls of ramen if you never speak of it again. One of the stranger aspects of Keisuke and Haruka's friendly rivalry was that neither of them ever verbally acknowledged any positive quality exhibited by the other. Even if Haruka were to beat him 100 times out of 100, Keisuke still wouldn't ever credit her. Likewise, whenever Haruka was beaten, which had begun to happen less and less as the two became used to fighting each other, she would never acknowledge defeat. They had been this way since Haruka had joined them. Though they practiced with each other every day, grinned when they passed each other, and seldom argued, neither would be caught dead complimenting the other. Naruto thought it was strange, but as long as they weren't trying to kill each other, he was fine with it. Still, that wouldn't stop him from having fun with them when they slipped up. All right, Keisuke, he said, I'll take the bribe today, since I've got bigger things on my mind. Watch yourself when Haruka Ne-chan comes back, though. Right. Keisuke fought the urge to question Naruto on what he had planned for him when Haruka Ne-chan came back. The kid's prankster gene had a habit of manifesting itself when Keisuke least wanted it to. His struggle was interrupted by the voice of the Toad Sennin behind him. So, Keisuke, what are you going to bribe me with? Hey. Keisuke had the feeling that this would turn out to be quite an interesting day. Hinata stood alone in the oak grove near the village's south wall. As she and her teammates usually did on their free days, she had come to practice, polishing the skills that had at last begun to earn her some respect amongst the Hyuga elders, in particular, her father. Just 3 weeks previous, Hiashi, who had not shown more than the smallest scraps of care for his daughter early in her life, had finally acknowledged Hinata as a fine young woman, and a fit heir to my place as clan head, before the Council of Elders, a memory which did not cease to make her smile. It was earning her more than favor among her clan, though. Neji, though still head and shoulders above her in experience and skill, had begun to comment openly among their peers on how quickly she was progressing, with the result that the dark, shy girl was receiving many cheerful greetings where she previously had not. The influence of the Hyuga prodigy, combined with Hinata's recent success in her missions and her emergence into the prime of her youthful beauty, had increased her reputation by leaps and bounds throughout the village. Already, several young men had approached her, though their attempts at establishing a deep relationship had thus far all met, usually unpleasant, ends. If Kiba, who had taken to Hinata like an overprotective big brother as well as teammate, didn't scare them away, then Neji would take the young man in question aside to discuss compatibility, after which the would-be suitor was never seen anywhere near the Hyuga compound ever again. Though she might have been a little embarrassed with the blunt manner in which Kiba and Neji handled the poor fools, Hinata was secretly glad to be rid of them. Many of them were not even worth giving a second look by Sakura or Ino's book, many of those that were had some mental issues that needed to be addressed. There were those few who both looked and behaved presentable, and one or two even had genuine charm, but in all of them, no matter how good-looking or well-mannered, not a single one possessed the fiery spirit, the strength of will, the empathy that comes from a painful past, or the courage that one develops to live with that pain. None of them had ever shown her how to stand up for herself, change herself, despite all she had been through. None of them were ever going to merit the name of Hokage. Hinata gave a small sigh, bringing a tinge of sadness into the bright, sunlit afternoon. Though her life had become better than it had ever been, without the presence of the one who had made it all possible for her, it just did not have the same flair. Yes, life was good, but it was also less than it could have been for her, and Hinata knew it. Yet she held hope. Rumors of the Toad Sennin's imminent return, and with it, Hinata knew, his return, had begun spreading in the village 2 days ago, a fact that Kiba had made sure she did not forget. In the absence of Naruto, the former Rookie 9 had found themselves without a class clown. In times where humor was deemed direly needed, Choji and Kiba had, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not, taken up the slack admirably. With the recent rumors flying about, Kiba had taken to showing up to team functions occasionally in the guise of Konohagakure's #1 most surprising ninja. When Hinata had asked him why he did it when the only ones who really found it funny were himself and their former sensei, Kurenai, Kiba had responded with a shrug and said, "I'm a little excited, I guess. None of us have seen the big idiot in almost 3 years, after all." Kiba's mood seemed to reflect the moods of all their peers, as well. When Hinata passed them in the streets, she noted that Shikamaru, Choji, Ino, Rock Lee, Neji, Tenten, and Sakura were all in a much more chipper state than usual. At the same time, she noticed that the adults in town seemed on edge, as if bracing themselves against a coming winter. The Ichiraku noodle bar was staying open later these days, and the ramen there seemed to improve in quality, as if in anticipation of its favorite customer's jubilant return. In fact, Konoha as a whole seemed to be holding its breath, all its many inhabitants clenching their jaws expectantly for the arrival of a single loudmouthed, blonde-haired, teenage ninja. While all this was going on, Hinata's peers, Kiba, Ino, and Sakura, in particular, went out of their way to mention Naruto and his party whenever she was in earshot. Whether it was meant as teasing or encouragement, Hinata did not know. However, she did know that it made her uncomfortable, and so she had thrown herself ever deeper into her training to escape it. The problem now was that it was difficult to have team practice when your team hasn't arrived.
Hinata resisted the urge to sigh and go home, instead opting to sink into her Juken-ready stance and begin her warm-up exercises without them.
Flowing gracefully through her movements, controlling her chakra with precision, the Hyuga heiress seemed to dance across the forest floor, and she made the leaves on their branches dance with her. Even Shino, who never openly admitted to experiencing an emotion, had conceded that watching Hinata's dance-like practice had moved him. His face had remained as expressionless as ever while he'd said this, but just the fact that he had said it spoke much for Hinata's graceful manner of combat.
The tall boy wearing orange and black in a nearby tree seemed to appreciate it, too. His face shone with a cheerful and impressed-looking expression as he lightly hopped down from the branch he'd been standing on. "Wow, Hinata! I've never seen anyone move like that." His voice was remarkably similar to that of the Uzumaki Naruto that Hinata had known 3 years previously, if a little deeper. "Who taught you to move like that? Some kind of angel or forgotten goddess?" She knew it wasn't really him, but the likeness was so effective that she couldn't stop her face from heating up slightly. Hinata stiffened a little, rising out of her stance and turning to face the boy whom she presumed to be her teammate. "Please, Kiba-kun, you know I don't like it when you do that," she said. The smile faded from the boy's whisker-marked face. It was replaced by a narrow-eyed, confused look. Hinata marveled at how accurately her teammate was portraying the slightly comical facial expressions of a dumbfounded Naruto, and began to wonder a bit if Kiba was more interested in their blonde comrade than he was telling. Her silver lavender eyes widened somewhat when she heard him ask, "Kiba, what, do I smell like wild dog or something? Maybe I should have bathed more carefully this morning."
His words trailed off and his eyes closed in concentration, as if he were going into a bout of deep thought. These words, this expression, and his immediate jump to the inaccurate conclusion that she had called him Kiba-kun, because of a completely mundane reason, were very realistic, Narutoisms, worthy of the genuine article.
What was more, Kiba had never tried to maintain the illusion once Hinata had asked him to stop. The situation was beginning to look very unlike what Hinata had first thought it was, and it was making her very nervous. As he shook off his apparent confusion and began to walk forward, instinct and force of habit made Hinata back slowly away and bring her fingers together in front of her. "Kiba-kun," she said, feeling herself growing steadily more uneasy, "please, stop, it isn't funny." The Naruto look-alike finished. A hurt expression was on his face now as he said, "What's not funny is you're not recognizing an old friend. It kinda hurts, after all the trouble I went to get noticed around here."
As he spoke, he continued to move towards Hinata until finally, as he trailed off, she had her back to an old tree. He brought one hand forward, resting it on the bark above her shoulder, leaning on the tree, and drew closer until their faces were mere inches apart. The pained smirk on his face and the expression in his cerulean pupils overpowered Hinata's better judgment. She began to think that maybe, just maybe, this was the real Naruto, and she was making him sad.
"Hinata," he said, "after all this time I thought I could count on you, if nobody else, to acknowledge me."
No way, she couldn't be making him sad. After all the chances she'd missed to make him happy, she couldn't stand for it.
Naruto-kun. But now a new expression had crossed the face of the boy she admired. It was no longer sad, on the contrary, it was a happier face than she could have imagined seeing. It was elated, triumphant, ecstatically happy. Scary happy, even. Deranged happy. Evil happy. Suddenly Hinata's arms were pinned to her sides, her body bound to the old tree with strong wire.
A kunai was in Naruto's hand and aimed straight at her exposed heart. His face, almost touching hers now, was the face of a murderer, with a dangerously sinister glint in his eyes. Hinata snapped out of her Naruto-induced trance too late. She was snared, and about to be killed without even throwing a single attack at her killer, because she had failed to see past a simple illusion. "Here's a little message from the master who will crush your precious blondie and your village along with him, the Uchi."
Gatsuga. A solid mass spinning at gale wind force can be very painful to a human being if a direct collision occurs, as the Naruto imposter quickly learned that day. The mass in question slammed into him like a runaway cart, sending him flying head over heels into a rather large and solid rock formation. From the cyclone-style spin emerged the form of Inuzuka Kiba, looking extremely annoyed and more than a little roughed up. Behind him, a large dog, named Akamaru by his wild man of a master, had its nose to the ground, seeking out possible additional targets. Insects swarmed toward Hinata from the trees above, alighting on the tree that she had been tied to. Within a few short moments, they had eaten through the wire that bound her, and she was free. As she shrugged off the last shreds of metal, Aburame Shino jumped lightly to the ground. He lifted his arms, silently commanding the destruction bugs who made their home within him. They left the tree and converged on the stunned Naruto look-alike, proceeding to eat away at him with a frenzy found nowhere else in the animal kingdom. "As you may have guessed, this shinobi is not Naruto," he said. His ever-inflectionless voice hinted at light fatigue and a sense of urgency. "That big-mouthed dunce," gasped Kiba, who had apparently spent a great deal of energy to arrive in time. "Even when he's gone, he can't stop making trouble for us." He stopped speaking when Akamaru barked at him, signaling that he'd picked up a new target. Both dog and master sprinted off into the forest in pursuit. "Hinata,
who had fully recovered her wits by this time, dusted herself off and tried to make sense of the situation. She turned to her bug user teammate. Shino-kun, what's happening? Aburame Shino responded as emotionlessly as was his custom. Very little is known about what is truly going on, he said. Kiba and I were greeted by a person appearing to be Uzumaki Naruto. We were unable to discern anything unusual about him, either by Akamaru's nose or the perceptions of my bugs. We believed him to be the true Naruto, and did not question him. Even when several more of him appeared, we did not react. We assumed that it was some childish prank involving his cage buncheons. He paused a moment, as if trying to put adequate words to his story without expressing too much feeling. Hinata, I find this somewhat disturbing. A dog's nose cannot be fooled by any normal shinobi illusion, and the bugs that make their hive in my body are supposed to be unmatched in skill at sensing friend from foe. Yet, for all our talents, we were fooled. Even the Byakugan, it seems, cannot see the truth behind this illusion. Hinata flushed a little bit and looked away from Shino. She wasn't about to tell her teammate that she had not even attempted to use the Byakugan on the strange Naruto, but she couldn't help feeling a bit ashamed. Her eyes wandered to the imposter, and she saw that the bugs had finished their work. Shino called them back, and the two of them went over to examine the body. It was nothing out of the ordinary, if a little pale. But Shino gave a nod and said, no mistake. It's identical to the ones Kiba and I defeated. Hinata looked at him, puzzled. You mean, all of them looked exactly like this one? Hi. Once the bugs had finished with them, they all looked as this one does now. This one does, too, said Kiba, who arrived behind them. He dumped the corpse unceremoniously next to the first one. It was bloody and had bite marks on it, and there were still patches of Naruto-esque skin left attached, but underneath all of that it was the same. Shino nodded again. Your theory may be correct, Kiba. Hinata's face became very serious. What theory is that, Shino-kun? The bug user pushed his sunglasses farther up his nose. It is likely, judging from the sheer numbers that have appeared and the consistency of their appearance beneath the illusion, that someone has been mass-producing Uzumaki Naruto for some ill purpose in the village of Konoha. Mass-producing Naruto-kuns, Hinata thought. For a moment, she suffered an involuntary daydream involving multiple Narutos in various states of mind with various Narutoish attitudes in various states of undress storming the Hyuga compound, overpowering and winning the respect of her father, and proceeding to bring the light that is Naruto's way of life to the dreary existence of the heirs to the Byakugan. This isn't good, Kiba said, jerking Hinata out of her vision. According to Kurenai-sensei and Hokage-sama, there's only one person with the power or even the sinister kind of mind you need to do something like this. All of the members of Team 8 thought the same name. Orochimaru. We should hurry back to the village, Shino said. If we were so easily deceived, then we cannot afford to make the assumption that others will not be fooled as well. Every person that Uzumaki Naruto has ever known could be in great danger. Iruka was still having a difficult time believing that so many shinobi could so flawlessly transform themselves into, and effortlessly pass for, his favorite student. Granted, Naruto tended to be a predictable sort of guy in his everyday behavior despite the unpredictability in combat that made him such a wild card, but nobody he knew could be so convincing with a normal illusion. Unfortunately for him, he did not have much time to focus on his disbelief, as he was currently under attack from no less than 20 Naruto look-alikes, all of them possessing the skill of at least Chunin-level shinobi. 5 more of them lay dead upon the ground with numerous shuriken in them, victims of Iruka's skillfully set traps on the academy grounds.
Iruka was battered and winded, and much of his chakra was already depleted in self-defense and the defense of the academy students, who had just finished evacuating safely. They needn't have bothered, though. The Naruto clones seemed to want to kill only Iruka. While this was probably best for the cadets, it didn't help the old instructor out at all. What's the matter, Iruka-sensei? One of them chimed. You can't be tired already. You always had the energy to rip on me whenever I played my pranks. What happened? Iruka grimaced. It might not have been authentic, but this Naruto looked real enough to sting him just a little. The boy was, after all, very special to him. He was like a kid brother and a son all rolled into one loud, blonde package. You, he growled, struggling to put as much force as possible behind his voice, don't talk to me like you know me, you fraud. All of the Narutos present gaped at him, wide-eyed. Iruka-sensei.
Then they all hung their heads, and tears began to flow from their blue eyes. They continued to speak, each saying a few words of the same monologue.
You were the very first person to accept me for the person I really was. As each one spoke, a change began to come over them all. Their eyes became blood red, and their teeth and fingernails began to elongate into serrated fangs and razor-sharp claws. The rage on their faces shone through to Iruka's mind like a flame on the blackest night. And every last one of them was radiating the emotion that Iruka had never expected to feel from his favorite pupil. Hate. Spitting, violent, killing hate, for breaking my trust. For leaving me alone. To confirm my existence. I'll rip you apart. This last phrase was echoed by every Naruto clone in front of him as they all charged forth, their eyes aglow with killer intent. Iruka was surrounded. He could neither escape nor fend off such a concerted attack, and reinforcements were reportedly being held up by other Narutoan invaders. With no way out, Iruka closed his eyes and braced himself for death.
Who do you think I am, Sabaku no Gaara? I'm not so weak, to have to confirm my existence that way. The voice, coming from above, caught the look-alikes completely by surprise. Halting their attack, every head turned to look up at the roof of the main building, where there stood a tall, wild-looking blonde in an orange and black jumpsuit. Their hesitation was all that was needed for his trap to work. Below them, a large and elaborate seal began to glow eerily white.
Ryude Ninpo. Shiri Bufuawana, Ghostly Arm Secret Art, Duststorm Snare. Some invisible force seemed to run through or across the seal, and the air immediately began to swirl around the imposters, blindingly thick with dust and dirt. None of them could move without being caught in the wind or choking on dust.
The real Naruto took the opportunity to leap down from his perch and grab his old sensei from the ground, moving the exhausted Chunin out of harm's way. Once they were a safe distance from the dirty maelstrom, Iruka was able to get a good look at his rescuer. He needed no second hint. The telltale gleam in the eyes, the slightly overconfident, excited grin, the battle-eager posture, no doubt about it, this one was Iruka's true protege.
Naruto. Your timing couldn't have been better. A smile crossed his blood-stained lips. All near-mortal injury aside, the boy's return meant the return of much grief, and also much excitement, to the village, and to Iruka's, for a ninja, simple life. Not the dead last I used to be, huh? Naruto's grin covered the entire lower third of his face. Iruka didn't respond. Instead he asked, what kind of ninjutsu was that? Surely Jiraiya-sama didn't teach a skill that unique? It didn't seem that Naruto's smile could have gotten any bigger, and yet at Iruka's question, it did. Nah. A really old friend taught it to me, but here's something that Ero Sennin did teach me. He ran his hands through a set of rapid, complicated seals, ending with the sign of the tiger. No way, Iruka thought as Naruto took a huge breath, no way he's going to. Kaden. Karyu Enden. Fire style, dragon flame missile. A gargantuan plume of flame leapt from Naruto's mouth, searing towards the trapped imposters. The flames were picked up by the wind, and spread to encompass the entire area of the trap. For a moment, Iruka worried that such a powerful technique, one once used by the third Hokage himself, might burn down the academy. But the intense wind contained it all, and the only things burned were dust and dirt and Naruto wannabes. When all was quiet again, Naruto turned to his former teacher, gleefully waiting for praise. Iruka, dumbfounded by the new Naruto's display of firepower, failed to give any words. But the Chunin and Junin who had arrived during the fireworks display did. Geez, Naruto, didn't you learn anything subtle in your 3 years away? You've destroyed all the evidence of the invaders. Naruto turned around to see 3 familiar faces. Tenten had been the speaker. With her were the other members of the old team Guy, Rock Lee and Hyuga Neji. All of them had grins on their faces. Tenten had feigned annoyance, but all 3 of them had expected nothing less from Uzumaki Naruto. Like the rest of their comrades, they'd given up hope on him learning much subtlety, and had put their faith in his ability to make up for it with his unpredictability and his overly flashy fighting style. Naruto flashed them his trademark foxy grin and replied, there'll be plenty more. Anyone who goes to the trouble to make this much trouble will definitely make a lot more trouble, or something like that. Hyuga Neji was pleased to have the buffoon back, though he said nothing. It was the same old Naruto. A fighting genius, but otherwise bordering on total idiocy. Yet Neji's eyes discerned a new aspect to the blonde ninja. The old Naruto might have asked why any evidence was needed at all as long as the targets were eliminated, and then become angry with himself when told why. This Naruto had merely laughed and asserted his belief that not all was lost. He was still Naruto in essence. Carefree, loud, and lacking any sense of subtlety, only now he was showing signs of a little maturity. Good, he thought, watching as his old teammate, Lee, exchanged youthful greetings with Naruto. He'll be much more suitable this way. Activating his Byakugan to scan for any surviving invaders, Neji spotted another welcome surprise. Team Kurenai was moving their way, coming to investigate the huge explosion of flame. This both interested and worried him. He was very interested in seeing what Naruto thought about the effects of Hinata's work with him, among other things. He was extremely proud of much his help had done for his cousin's development. At the same time, however, he was worried about Hinata. After 3 years away from him, what would her reaction be to Naruto's sudden reappearance? Well, we'll find out rather quickly, won't we? Indeed, they did. Kiba was the first to spot him. Unfortunately, the exceptionally bad quality of his day, combined with the number of bruises he'd acquired and the number of Narutoan invaders he'd had to pummel, caused him to immediately assume the worst. Ah! He cried, another one. How many can there possibly be? He charged the unsuspecting blonde with Akamaru at his side, whirling into the Gatsuga with all his waning force. Without sufficient warning, Naruto was blown 40 yards straight backwards. Before anyone could muster the wit to shout a warning, Kiba renewed his attack, coming at Naruto on all fours. This time, however, Kiba's attack was parried. A thick tendril of blue chakra lashed out in front of Naruto from behind his back, blocking Kiba's right arm, while 4 more held the big dog at bay. Another 4 remained behind Naruto, ready to parry anything more that might come his way. Cursing, Kiba threw a foot at his head, but this Naruto caught with his hand. What the hell? Kiba asked, twisting out of Naruto's grip and landing on his feet 10 yards away. He. Naruto said, beaming with pride, how do you like my new specialty, Kiba? The Rokujuyan Ryude, Tamashibi no Kyubi. 64 ghostly arms, 9 tails of light. Neji's Byakugan revealed a wealth of information about this new maneuver. The Hyuga prodigy was shocked to see that the 9 tails of light were each made of 4 thin strands of chakra carrying tendrils, emerging from different tenketsus across his body and woven together into thicker bands. What was more, the strands that made up the tails were not the only strands. Several more flickered out from the rest of his tenketsus, apparently unused. Whatever this technique was, Neji could see that Naruto was not using it to its full potential, but this realization did not negate the amazement that the potential he was using generated. Damn it, Kiba swore. You're not like the others. What the hell are you? Iruka stepped forward. Kiba, it's all right. This one really is. Uzumaki Naruto, of course. Don't tell me you forgot your #1 most surprising ninja. Or has the kid been lying about his amazing reputation the whole time? Neji frowned. He'd been so busy watching things here that he'd allowed this unknown shinobi to approach them uncontested. He was about to go and question the newcomer, and to fight him as a Junin of Konoha should if he proved unfriendly, but his uncertainty was dispelled by Naruto's response. Keisuke. You missed all the action, Nichan. What were you and Ero Sennin doing back there? Looking again with his Byakugan, Neji could see that this man seemed to possess the same projected chakra strands that Naruto did. His sense of amazement increased as he watched the strands sweep through the air at a rapid rate, feeling out objects, exploring their surroundings. This man appeared to utilize the ability more fully, using the strands as a sensory organ when he wasn't using them for something else. Easy, kid. I just had to help the old fart get his day planner sorted out right. Hard to believe how easily he mixes up his priorities. Now Neji was curious. Naruto addressed this man as a brother, yet he had never been seen before anywhere in the village, as far as Neji's memory went. He could tell that the man had some considerable skill in the secret arts from the way he held himself, but his easygoing attitude and casual reference to the famous Toad Sennin of Konoha implied that he wasn't a threat. At least on the surface. Anyway, Naruto, the stranger, Keisuke continued, nice kaboom. Care to introduce me to your friends? Naruto was more than happy to oblige. With gusto, he introduced Keisuke to Neji, Lee, Tenten, Iruka, and Kiba, saying hello himself to each in turn. When he reached the blue-haired, red-faced girl at the back of the group, however, he was at a loss for words. Keisuke, this is... who is that girl? I've never seen her around before. Keisuke, however, didn't appear to need any introduction. He stepped closer to her, and Neji could see as he swept his chakra strands over her, feeling out her shape, her aura, her posture. Within a moment of concentration, Keisuke smiled. Hyuga Hinata, he asked, isn't it? I thought we'd meet again. Neji looked at Naruto. He, along with a number of their comrades, had been wanting to see this moment for a long while. He smiled smugly when he saw the odd look on the blonde teenager's face. Even without the Byakugan, he could tell exactly what Naruto was thinking. This is Hinata. Job well done, Neji thought. The smug smile wouldn't leave his face for some time. Hinata-sama, you've grown so much, he's speechless.
Keisuke also smiled. Kid's been so wrapped up in learning his Rokuji and Ryu that he hasn't stopped to think about all the good things that might be going on back home.
Hinata finally fought down her nerves and dropped her hands to her sides. This fidgeting habit was something she'd have to work harder on kicking. Anyo, Naruto-kun? Are you alright? It was a good question. Naruto was beginning to look less like himself and more like a statue. Fortunately, it was enough to jar him back to himself in time to form a relevant reply. Hey. Yeah, Hinata, I'm fine, he said. Better than ever. Keisuke and Ero Sennin turned me into a ninjutsu powerhouse. He was mostly himself again now. Loud and infectiously jubilant. As he turned to introduce Keisuke to Shino, however, there was an undercurrent in his thoughts that was having trouble finding its way out of his brain. Wow. Hinata's changed. A lot. As he finished the introduction, he added the afterthought, I like it. As soon as Keisuke finished shaking hands with Shino and both of them had pushed their sunglasses back farther up their noses, Iruka spoke up. Hey, Naruto. You've been gone a long time, and I'm sure you're tired from all that walking. How about I treat us all to some ramen? It'll be a great opportunity to relax and tell us a few stories. The elite should just be finishing up the last of your lookalikes, so we can go now. What do you say? Naruto smirked, and turned an evil eye towards Keisuke. Oh, I don't think you have to treat us, Iruka-sensei. I've got a few favors left to collect. 85 of them. Keisuke groaned. I deserve it. I knew those ramen bribes would come back to bite me on the ass one day. NO234 ran full out away from the village of Hiding in Leaf, knowing full well what would happen if he were caught. The Konoha interrogators wouldn't be so bad, he knew, compared to what would happen after. Once the Leaf was through with him, Danzu's contacts would arrange to have him transferred to another holding facility. And there the real pain would begin. They'd feed him to the Uchiha, and he'd die screaming. He'd seen it happen. He had no desire to experience it firsthand. So he ran. The face-copying jutsu would weaken in a few days, and he could return to his natural form, find a nice village to hole up in, and live in moderate safety for the rest of his unnatural life. That was the plan, anyway. But alas, such plans have a tendency to go disastrously awry at the most inconvenient times. NO234 tried to duck into a bush to hide from the shinobi party, but he was much too slow and clumsy. One of them heard him. Veins popped out around her eyes, and she looked right through the bush and saw him there. With speed born of desperation, he charged the woman, fist dead. Without missing a beat, however, she swept a leg out, tripping him. He began to fall. Right into the woman's open palm. The velocity provided by the fall, coupled with the chakra that the woman spiked into his system, caused the blow to be very painful and knockout-inducing. Thus was NO234 defeated with a single shot. Before he lost consciousness, NO234 could hear the woman exchanging words with her companions. Naruto. No, Sakura-san. It's just a copy. A very convincing illusion, but still not the genuine article. The true Naruto-kun should be back in the village by now. Sakura-san. Temari-san. Do either of you have any rope? I think there was some in Kakashi-sensei's pack. I'll check. Please don't wake Kakashi-san, though. He had it very rough back in Suna. Right. Haruka-san. Ichiraku Ramen had not had so many customers at one time since the introduction of Tuchi's Diet Ramen 3 years previously, and even then there had not been quite so many. Fortunately, the shop had been able to expand itself to nearly 3 times its original size in recent months, and the new tables and reupholstered bar stools just barely fit the large group inside. Old Man Tucci had closed the store to additional customers. It did not seem like this little private party would be going anywhere fast. The tall man in sunglasses was still shoveling out money for the ramen as fast as the party could eat it. If there was such a thing as bliss, Naruto was very near to it. His stomach was happy to have its 4th bowl in it, his spirit was happy to have exercised its growing power for all to see, and his soul was happy to be surrounded by his friends again. They crowded around him, commenting on his new attire. Ino had happily scoffed at the tacky, stealth compromising shade of orange while exhibiting a smile of exceptional caliber. Laughing at his stories about the illustrious Jiraiya, marveling at the tall man with the rapidly emptying wallet as Naruto sang his praises, and asking questions about Haruka and about all the new tricks he had learned. In particular, they asked about the flashy, unique jutsu involving the powerful chakra, tails. Well, Keisuke knows more about it than I do, he said, his mouth full of noodles. He took a moment to swallow before continuing. I only really got the hang of the Tamashibi no Kyubi a few months ago. It was hard enough trying to learn the Rokujuyan Ryude in between Ero Sennin's sessions. Naruto suddenly experienced a sensation of awe as he realized how many sets of eyes were focused on him. He'd known that people would want to know about the Ryude, but he'd never expected anyone to be this attentive to him in his entire life. Not that he minded, it definitely felt like something he could get used to. Filling his voice with as much pride as he could, he kept speaking, the ramen before him temporarily forgotten. We're not really sure exactly what the Ryude is. Keisuke thinks it might be some emerging type of Kekai Genkai Jutsu, but neither of us can tell. My hopes are high, though. If it is, nobody's going to be able to forget me. If it is, thought Neji, seated at a table nearby with his teammates, then he's going to find himself in the spotlight, that's for sure. But he's also going to find out just what kind of burdens the possessors of bloodline-specific jutsus must assume. If he lives to have children, they'll have to be trained in its proper use, how to conceal it from enemies that would eliminate or steal it. In short, Uzumaki Naruto will have to figure out how to manage a Kekai Genkai clan system. The idea didn't sound so bad. If one did not take into account the fact that on the average day, Uzumaki Naruto appeared to have little else on his mind besides eating ramen, finding his lost teammate, and learning to become the best shinobi in the village, for the village's own protection. Noble goals, the latter too, but they wouldn't help to keep a powerful bloodline limit technique under control. And Uzumaki doesn't seem to have any desire to learn anything else at the moment, Neji thought. Watching the laughing blonde a moment longer, the Hyuga prodigy came to a decision. As much as it still pains me to admit it, I still owe that happy idiot. Images of his younger self in the dirt before all of Konoha in the Chunin examination. Learning a painful lesson from a dropout who made his own fate rather than resigning himself to it filled his mind. If this, Rokujuyan Ryude, is what we think it is, then I'll teach Naruto a few lessons in return. One table over, Neji's cousin had been fairly quiet. Hinata had laughed along with the others at Naruto's tales of Jiraiya's misadventures, and listened with the same curiosity as everyone else to his rough explanation of his new powers, but she had not said a word herself since they had arrived. She now sat, slightly pink-faced and wide-eyed, contemplating all that she had seen and heard. Uzumaki Naruto had grown to be all that Hinata had hoped he would be. He was still the high-spirited, tough-talking, orange-wearing kid that she had admired 3 years ago. He still cherished a dream of becoming the Hokage and protecting the village, still had the indomitable instinct to push forward, no matter the cost to himself. His inner strength, the strength that truly endeared him to her, was strong as ever. But now, Uzumaki Naruto actually possessed much of the outward strength that he had been striving to obtain when she had last seen him. His flashy display near the academy earlier that morning had been a true wonder, coming from so young a person. Jiraiya's training had, apparently, paid off extremely well. But it was this Rokujuyan Ryude technique that was most catching her attention, and the attention of their peers. She had taken a quick look with the Byakugan at him when they'd arrived at the restaurant, but she hadn't been able to see anything unusual then. The strange arms that continuously protruded from Keisuke's tenketsu seemed to have retracted in Naruto's case. Their mark, however, still remained burned into her teammate's memory. "Arg, Naruto," groaned Kiba, "those tails you have, like hitting a damn brick wall." "They ought to be," Naruto beamed, grabbing his fifth bowl of ramen, "since it takes more than half of the arms to make them. 4 arms per tail, and 9 tails is what? 36 arms out of 64. Not a whole lot left over for trap seals and other stuff. So yeah, it costs me something." Once some of the group had gotten over their shock at Naruto's sudden knowledge of multiplication tables, they proceeded to murmur softly to themselves in various states of mild awe. Hinata, however, had a different thought pattern going through her head. 9 tails. She whispered, "Tamashibi no Kyuubi. Naruto-kun?" She raised her voice to an audible level as she said his name, seeking his attention. "Huh?" came the intelligent reply as the blonde turned her way. She watched as his eyes settled on her, widened a little, then returned to normal as he appeared to shake something out of his head. "Damn," he thought, "I'm still having trouble remembering that Hinata looks like this now." Throwing off his minor amazement more quickly this time, Naruto settled back into himself. "Yeah, Hinata. What's up?" "Well, I was wondering. The tails technique is very good. Very creative. And cute, in a way. And generally incredible. But I was wondering, Naruto-kun, why 9 of them?" She could see Naruto's face pale a little at these words, and wondered what she could have done to produce that reaction. Hinata was about to continue questioning him, but Shikamaru beat her to it. "I've been wondering about that, myself," he said. "It's a very creative jutsu, that's for certain. What's most interesting about it is the way it seems to allude to the 9-tailed fox demon which almost annihilated Konoha." Several people glanced at Shikamaru's bold statement. Many of them had been wondering about that, themselves, but Shikamaru had been the first to act on his suspicions. As everyone's eyes settled back on Naruto, Hinata could sense that the blonde was beginning to get a little bit uncomfortable. "I'm not saying it's all bad, Naruto," he continued, "but I'm curious to know what might have been running through your head, conscious or subconscious, that inspired you to take on the semblance and, partially, the name of that beast." Naruto seemed as though he'd been backed into a corner. Hinata could see that gears were turning in his brain, and he had the look of a stressed man attempting to make up an answer that would satisfy his friends without giving away the truth. It lasted only about 2 seconds, but that was more than enough time for her to discern that there was more to the story of this jutsu than Naruto was about to tell. "Well, with a name like that," he said, the big grin returning to his face, "you can't really expect anybody to ignore it, can you?" Most people in the room seemed to buy his explanation, and they returned to their meals happily, some of them re-engaging in excited conversation. But all over the restaurant Hinata could see the faces of those who seemed to know better. Shikamaru and Neji, like her, had noticed the discomforted expression and caught his frantic search for a good lie. Others though, such as Iruka-sensei and Old Man Tucci and the newcomer, Keisuke, exchanged unmistakable silent communication in the form of grave, slightly sad smiles. "What is Naruto-kun keeping from us?" A knock at the door ended her chain of thoughts. Tucci moved to intercept the newcomers, indicating that the shop was closed, but stopped when he recognized the Anbu masks. Bowing to them, he moved aside to let them pass. They strode into the center of the room, where the eyes of everyone present fell upon them. The leader unrolled an official-looking scroll and proceeded to read. "By order of Godem Hokage, we Anbu are instructed to take Uzumaki Naruto and his guest, Keisuke, to the executive office in Hokage Tower." Sighing in relief, Keisuke slipped his now empty wallet into his pocket. Shizune opened the door and stood aside for the Hokage's guests to pass. She gave Naruto a big smile, happy to see him and witness his great development, but said nothing. This was official village business, and she had to remain silent, as was procedure, at least until Naruto shattered all pretense that this was business as usual with his unquenchable rebelliousness. As the two men came to a halt before the great desk, her superior, the lord of all the ninja in the village in Konoha, raised her head, grinned broadly, and opened the meeting in her usual diplomatic manner. "I am Konohagakure's 5th Hokage, Tsunade. It gives me pleasure to welcome you both back to the village. It is an honor to be welcomed here, Hokage-sama. Your reputation, and the reputation of Konoha, precedes you, even in the remote parts of the world from whence I come." The stranger bowed low in reverence to Tsunade. Shizune marveled at the grace he had for such a tall man, and more so at his apparent ease in a diplomatic setting. Not all ninja had such traits. As Uzumaki Naruto proceeded to demonstrate, "Can the formalities, Ba-chan. You should know better around me. And you should know better than to talk like that in front of your superiors, brat," Tsunade said. Then she swept around the desk and came to stand before him, a huge grin prominent on her mien. Like many in the village, she was pleased to see him back. "Jiraiya has already made his report. I thought I'd bring you in here to make sure there was nothing that he missed in his excitement at being back home." Grins on both sides turned sinister, knowing the kind of thing that the Toad Sennin was likely to conveniently forget. However, Naruto was feeling merciful today, so he decided to keep his mouth shut for now. He'd get a little more blackmail out of Ero Sennin before he blabbed. Tsunade wasn't pleased at her lack of reason to smash Jiraiya, but was too glad to have Naruto back to care at that moment. She turned to the stranger, whom Shizune presumed to be the Keisuke from Jiraiya's report, and began to question him. "Keisuke of the Grave, correct? Speaking, Hokage-sama. Jiraiya told me that you are skilled in the shinobi arts. He reported that you fought alongside him many times during your travels, and that you have, on some occasions, handled multiple journeyman-level ninja." "That is accurate, Hokage-sama." Tsunade appeared to be scrutinizing him very carefully, though what she was searching for exactly, only she knew. "Is it also true that you have defeated the A-ranked renegade ninja, Daisuke of the Rotting Blood Gang?" Keisuke's face twitched a little at the memory of the annoying bone tank, but he kept his composure. "I take partial credit for the destruction of Daisuke, yes. My power enabled his defeat, and the killing blow was mine, but I alone was not equal to the task." Tsunade paused a moment, considering what she had heard. "You're honest, at least," she said. "A quality you don't always see in shinobi without a village affiliation. Why deceive when deception can serve no purpose, Hokage-sama?" Tsunade smiled again. "Indeed." She walked back around her desk and returned to the comfort of her chair. "Uzumaki Naruto. You are hereby restored to full active duty. Since both Kakashi and Sakura are away on another mission at present, you may spend your time as you wish until called for." Naruto gave an invigorated salute. "All right, Tsunade Ba-chan." Tsunade nodded and then addressed Keisuke. "Keisuke of the Grave, I welcome you again to our village. Please feel free to treat Konoha as your home for as long as you wish." "Thank you, Hokage-sama. Also, because Jiraiya has vouched for you, and I have no doubt that Naruto would if I asked him to, I would like to extend you an offer of work, as a shinobi under my command." Both Keisuke and Naruto balked at this. They had talked among each other about possibly getting Keisuke accepted into Konoha's ranks, but Keisuke had not expressed any confidence that this would happen. Hidden shinobi villages generally did not tend to hire outsiders, lest they be spies or assassins from other countries. Are you certain, Hokage-sama? You haven't known me more than 5 minutes." Keisuke was uncharacteristically bashful. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "Are you at all uncertain of your ability to serve this village with honor and loyalty?" Keisuke exhaled deeply and set his face straight. "No, Hokage-sama." "Good." Tsunade withdrew a stack of papers from her desk drawer. "Fill these out, and then report to Training Area 17 on the date indicated. One of my Junin shinobi will be there to serve as your examiner." Naruto piped up. "Examiner, Ba-chan?" "Yes, of course," replied the Hokage. "It's obvious that Keisuke is at least a Chunin-level shinobi. However, we do not have enough evidence of his higher levels of performance to promote him to the Junin level right away. The examiner will fight him, and if he performs well enough, then the examiner will recommend him to me for promotion. Once it's done, he'll get his Hite 8 headband and his vest and we'll be ready to use him in the field." Naruto grinned wide and said, "So, a test, huh? You'd better not fail it, Keisuke, or I'm never going to let you live it down." Keisuke restrained himself from smacking his little brother upside the head and bowed deeply to Tsunade. "I am honored that you put so much faith in me, Tsunade-sama. I accept your offer gladly." Tsunade rearranged the paperwork on her desk, picked up her pen, and resumed her daily workload. It was quite large. On a less joyous occasion, she might have grumbled over it. That'll be all, you two. Dismissed. Shizune, please show Keisuke to the Human Resources Department downstairs and see to it that he gets himself some decent housing. Hitaki Kakashi woke from his slumber feeling completely drained and badly sore. He could remember very little of the events of the past few days. He knew that they had left Suna partially victorious, the Cage, Gaara of the desert, saved at the expense of a venerable and wise old woman's life, but the Biju known as Shukaku having been taken despite their best efforts to thwart Akatsuki's plans. He remembered that Hyuga Haruka, a woman that had joined them early in the fight and been a great assistance to the entire effort, had volunteered to escort Kakashi home, along with Sakura and the young Junin from Suna, Tamari. He also remembered a brief period of wakefulness in which the group had suddenly been attacked by a renegade appearing to be Naruto, his former genin student. He hadn't had a chance to see how that encounter had ended before sleep had taken him again. Finally able to stay awake for longer than a few moments, Kakashi silently resolved, not for the first time, to forever after be much more conservative when using his Sharingan eye. The other occupant of the room saw him stirring feebly, and came to his side. Squinting in the bright light, Kakashi could make out the form of Haruka standing over him. He made an attempt to raise his head, but Haruka stopped him. "Save your strength, Kakashi-san," she said. "You're going to need it to recover from the strain of using your Sharingan," among other grievances. Held fast by both her kind intent and her firm grasp, Kakashi complied. However, he could not relax his curiosity. "The Naruto copy that charged us," he said, "what happened to it?" "Ah, you were awake for that?" Haruka asked. Her expression was apologetic. "I tried to keep that quiet, seeing as how you needed your rest." "That's all right," Kakashi returned. "What happened to it?" Haruka heaved a sigh. The clone did not remain a clone for long. After a day, it lost that shape and returned to its original form. Kakashi pondered. Was its true form anybody that you or Sakura recognized? No, it was pale and nondescript. Neither of us could remember anyone like him. "I see," Kakashi said. "Well, no help there. Have we reached Konoha?" "Hi, Kakashi-san. So the imposter is being interrogated." Haruka nodded. "Tsunade-sama asks you not to worry. Morino Ibiki is seeing him as we speak." Kakashi said, satisfied. Ibiki would get the truth out of the little worm, whatever he had to do. For a moment, they were silent. Both of them were wondering the same thing. When the true identity of the culprit was determined, and the name of his superior dug up, would it be just some random troublemaker? Or would something or someone more sinister be behind this? Thoughts of the dark snake Sennin and his favorite apprentice as well as of Akatsuki agents made Kakashi cringe. For two of their greatest enemies to strike one after another in such rapid succession. "Naruto-kun and Keisuke arrived only a day before we did," Haruka said, breaking the silence. "It seems that Keisuke is going to be accepted as one of the shinobi here, and they'll be testing him for Junin level within a week." Kakashi didn't reply verbally, though his uncovered eye widened in surprise. He knew as well as anyone else how rare an occurrence this was. Yet he did not question it. He knew Jiraiya, and trusted his judgment. That, and Naruto tended to pick good people to befriend. Instead he asked, "Who will be testing him?" Tsunade-sama didn't say. "Ah. It might have been interesting, Kakashi-san, if you were well enough to do it. After all, both of you have special abilities that you were not born with." Kakashi could not nod, but he made an effort to show assent. "The Sharingan. And this Ryu that you've told me about." "Hi. It would have been very intriguing, I think, to see how those two matched each other." Kakashi wondered only a moment, and then it clicked. To see how Naruto's ability might compare to Sasuke's, right? Haruka's turn came to widen her eyes. "Your powers of insight are as good as I've heard," she said. "Naruto-kun is a good young man, as I've learned from my 2 years in his company, but I do often wonder about this Uchiha Sasuke that he sometimes talks about. From what I've heard, he could be very dangerous." "Indeed he could be," Kakashi said. "Naruto and Sasuke share a bond not uncommon among boys their age. They're the fiercest of rivals outwardly. But unspoken between them is a bond of deep friendship." Haruka stared at him as he went through his monologue. Naruto had only told her the bare bones about Sasuke's involvement in his life. It seemed that it was a painful memory to talk about, or else Haruka would know more already. She cared for the boy as something halfway between a mother and a sister, and knew he'd had a hard life, But she hadn't even dreamed that he could have gotten himself into a situation so painfully complicated. Both of them have led extremely painful lives up to this point. Both are striving to be stronger. Both possess incredible powers. But the similarities end there. Naruto is a class clown, a pariah who fights with the Rokujuyan Ryude and the strength of Yondaimi's legacy. Sasuke is an avenger, a survivor who fights with the Sharingan and strength born of lust for revenge. Kakashi paused to let his body recuperate before finishing. Inevitably, one of them must defeat the other decisively. But nobody has seen Sasuke for 3 years, and who can say what this Ryude technique will do for Naruto? We can't predict from their different drives alone which one is stronger. So all we can do, Haruka took over for the exhausted Junin, is put our faith in Naruto-kun's motivation to succeed, and do what we can to help. Yes. Kakashi finished. He sagged into the hospital bed, fully ready to go back to sleep. Haruka stood, a resolved look on her face. Thank you, Kakashi-san. I'm sorry for disturbing you. You need to recover, and it probably is not easy to speak of this. But you've put my mind a little more at ease. Rest well. And she walked out of the room, leaving Kakashi to his fitful dreams. Haruka approached the Hyuga compound with mixed feelings. She had not been here, in the presence of other Hyuga, for many years. As an outsider and independent, she was still supposed to be welcome upon the property. In spite of this fact, however, she could not shake off the eerie feeling of forbidding she felt as she entered. The courtyard felt cold to her and unforgiving, as though she were treading thin ice. For many paces, she met nobody, and began to think that perhaps the family had relocated. As she turned to go out the way she came, though, Haruka found herself face to face with a middle-aged woman who blocked her way. She had the same silver-white eyes and dark hair that characterized all Hyuga, but these eyes were not looking at her with any sort of welcome. Suddenly, Haruka believed she knew why she had begun to feel so cold. I know you, the woman spoke. Her voice was venomous. Kin Abandoner. Kin Abandoner. Haruka could remember her father being called such in the early days of her childhood, just before they had left Konoha. Apparently, this woman was a branch house member who had known her and her parents then, and resented them for leaving. Haruka steeled herself, resolving not to be drawn into a conflict. In a calm voice, she addressed the angry woman. Greetings, sister. Is Hiyashi-sama here tonight? The woman's expression did not change. Yes, he is here. What business does an outsider such as yourself have with him? I have returned to stay in Konoha for a while, where I will be helping some friends of mine. I intend to give my report to Hiyashi-sama and then to ask him to allow me house room. The face of the woman contorted into a sneer. Hiyashi-sama will not be able to hear your report, as he is occupied with family and village business. There is no more room available to you. Leave at once. Haruka was rapidly becoming confused. She also was Hyuga, even if she had lived outside the village for most of her life. Why was this woman so cold to her? Haruka knew that the spacious estates of the Hyuga could easily accommodate her. What compelled this woman to tell such a blatant lie in order to make her leave? Annoyed now, but in control, Haruka spoke again in a firmer tone of voice. I am certain that we can come to some kind of arrangement. May I wait inside until Hiyashi-sama has a spare moment? Hiyashi-sama will have no spare moments for some time, Kin Abandoner. Leave. Exasperated, Haruka dropped all pretense of following protocol. No, I will not leave until I have spoken once to Hiyashi. You are obviously doing everything in your power to prevent me, though you should have no reason to. But I will not yield to you unless the clan head commands me to do so. Haruka turned to head back into the compound, only to find herself facing 3 more Hyuga with the same malefic expression. These were somewhat younger than the first woman, and evidently more adept at combat. All of them bore the caged bird seal upon their foreheads. We will not permit you to simply walk in here like a haughty noble, as though the Hyuga owe you something. No, you will leave now, Kin Abandoner, or have your comeuppance given you by our hands. Angry now and afraid, Haruka could neither go forward nor back away. What gives you the right to deny me, your own flesh and blood, passage into my own ancestral home? What makes you think that you are in any position to claim that I warrant any sort of comeuppance? The Hyuga branch members advanced, slowly, cautiously, measuring the strength of the invader. Their Byakugan eyes blazed with white anger as they raised their palms before them. Then, at some unspoken signal they charge. Haruka braced herself for the impact of 3 Juken palms. A voice crying out to the evening twilight stopped everything. Enough! The branch members halted their advance, turning to see their clan leader standing wrathfully in the front doorway. Immediately, they sank to their knees in deference to Hiashi. Their Byakugan eyes receded. "Leave us," commanded Hiashi. His order was obeyed instantly. The first woman, however, made sure to give Haruka one last vengeful look before vanishing. "Come with me," Hiashi said, and turned to go into the main building. Morino Ibiki emerged from the interrogation room, finding the Hokage waiting for him, his face grave. He adjusted his head cover and drank from a flask on his belt, preparing himself to give his full report. "Well," he said at last, "the prisoner has finally responded to us. Very interesting news, Hokage-sama." Tsunade's face held a stony expression, prepared to hear the worst. "All right. No mind games, Ibiki. What is it?" Ibiki was quiet for a long moment, pondering what he had heard and trying to make sense of things in his own head. He turned it over again and again until the Hokage finally snapped him back out of it. "Morino Ibiki. What have you learned from the captive?" "He has returned, Hokage-sama." Cloudy skies had settled over the village hidden in the leaves. They were dark, ominous clouds that swirled above the numerous shinobi heads like the manifestation of some dark promise. Shopkeepers made themselves busy with buffering their wares against any sudden gale or downpour that might strike at any moment. Despite their suspicions, however, no rains had fallen from them since they had arrived, and no wind other than the occasional lazy breeze made itself felt. Still, there were those who could not throw off the feeling that something was lurking behind those black clouds. But no cloud, however black, could deter Naruto from his course. He strode confidently through the cool afternoon like a beacon of summer light. Some people that he passed, the ones that had come to respect him, caught his radiance and had their own rekindled, thanking him with waves of hello or just simple smiles. Others, who had come to fear him over his 15 years of life, including the diminishing Naruto as a demon population and the increasing number of old folks and perverts whom he had given heart attacks, shied away from it, retreating into whatever shelter they could find. If Naruto noticed the profound effects that he was having on Konoha's people, he did not show it. But the girl who emerged from the Hokage Tower as he was passing did, and she had every intention of letting him know. Just as soon as she got over being amazed at the fact that the one who, at the start of Team 7's first truly difficult mission, had been called the midget, was now several inches taller than she was. Gathering herself back together, she called Naruto's name. Watching him turn and seeing the surprised, then ridiculously happy face brought back old memories, and she couldn't help but feel glad as well. 3 years ago, her team had been shattered, her teammates leaving Konoha for places unknown. With Naruto's return, her life felt a little bit more whole. "Sakura-chan. Welcome back, Naruto," she said. Thanks," he replied. "You missed one hell of a reunion party a couple of days back. It's a shame you were off on a mission then." "Well, it couldn't be helped. We couldn't exactly let the Kazekage, our strongest ally, die, and most of the other medical ninja were already in the field." The mention of the Kazekage seemed to draw Naruto's interest. "Yeah, I heard about that," he said. "How's Gaara?"
"Fine," replied Sakura. "He's alive, though it cost an old woman her life, and the demon that was supposed to be living in him got taken out."
Sakura thought she saw a shiver go up the spine of her old teammate, something that she had rarely seen before. "Naruto?" she asked, "is everything okay? You didn't lose some of that annoying overconfidence out in the wilderness, did you?" The effects of whatever had been bothering Naruto vanished quickly. After only a moment's hesitation, he had recovered himself. "Yeah, Sakura-chan, everything's all right," and the way he said it, it looked like it was. Sakura let it go, dismissing it as probably some bad memory about the old Chunin exam. "So, Naruto, where are you headed? Got yourself a mission already?" "Nah, Tsunade Ba-chan is letting me get settled back in, I guess. I'm going to go see a friend of mine in this neighborhood." In this neighborhood, so near the Hokage Tower. Sakura's thoughts cast about for a while, trying to remember who she knew that lived in these parts. The nearest to this neighborhood she knew about was the Hyuga family, but even they were a few blocks away. Most of the living areas around the tower were occupied by the elder council members and other influential members of the village government. "Do you mind if I walk with you?" she asked. Curiosity had gotten the better of her this time. And she hadn't had a chance to talk to her teammate in years. Naruto grinned hugely. Sure, we got plenty of catching up to do, after all. And so they walked together around the tower, heading for one of two small residential lots embedded between the sections of busy village that surrounded it. As they walked, Sakura began to take notice of the effects that the years had had on her comrade. He was still a laughing buffoon, sure, and completely hopeless in the more subtle shinobi arts. This suited him just fine, however. Now he could back up his boasts with a strength that was palpable even through his loud orange jacket. And one more thing was palpable to Sakura, his apparent shift in attitude towards her. In their early days under Kakashi-sensei, Naruto had pursued her relentlessly, hoping to get her to go out with him. It had annoyed her to no end, and there were many times when she had been forced to express her annoyance violently. Now, though, Naruto walked and talked comfortably with her, making no trouble at all. He was tolerable. Moreover, he was actually pleasant. He didn't exactly treat her as she had seen him treat their other friends, namely Kiba, Shikamaru, and Choji, to begin with. But it was a slight difference only, just a slight softening of mannerisms in her presence. It dawned on her that he was now treating her like Naruto's version of a dear friend, rather than a love interest. The knowledge was both a relief and a surprise to her. While she inwardly celebrated the death of the annoying, uncouth little blonde, part of her wondered what had brought it about. Ino had once teased her, telling her that absence makes the heart grow fonder, that she would never be rid of him. Sakura had, of course, hoped that it would prove untrue, but now that it had, she was perplexed. Had someone replaced her in his heart? Had time simply withered away his affection? What if he hadn't given up on her at all, and was instead trying to win her over in a smarter, subtler way? These questions and more cavorted through her mind as she tried to fathom why Naruto had begun to treat her like a very close but not that close friend, like he had often treated Hinata, back in those days between the Chunin exam and his departure. This new train of thought dominated all the rest. Could she have? Already? No way. Naruto, meanwhile, was having completely unrelated thoughts. Occasionally his attention wandered to such mundane things as the conversation with his teammate, or thoughts of Keisuke's upcoming examination, or marveling at how much had changed in his hometown. But mostly, he focused on what Sakura had told her at the beginning, and the demon that was supposed to be living in him got taken out. So Gaara and Shukaku fell to Akatsuki after all. It's good that Gaara survived, but it doesn't mean much. Akatsuki still proved their point. They've got enough power now. They think they're ready to take me. It wasn't a happy thought. He dealt with it in his usual style. They can try. I'm a lot stronger than I was before, and I'll be stronger yet by the time they get here. They won't bring me down. Not Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage. Never, resolving to work harder at his training, Naruto banished the thoughts of Akatsuki from his mind. It was at the perfect time that he did so, for at that moment they arrived at their destination. Keisuke was walking out of his gate, dressed in his usual gear, waving a greeting to them. His sunglasses still perched on his nose, hiding the emptiness of his eye sockets, and his oaken hair waved in the breeze. Naruto noted, however, that he now sported a Konoha headband and the standard-issue shinobi vest that was given to every ninja of the journeyman level and above. Naruto's grin expressed his appreciation for the additions to Keisuke's ensemble. The blind man made Konoha's colors look good. "Hey, Naruto," he called. "Come to check out my new place." Indeed, it appeared worthy of checking out. It was what appeared to be a small compound, with the main building flanked by a garden on one side and a small side building on the other. There might have been more, but the rest was blocked from view by the walls. You know it, Keisuke Ni-chan. Standing proudly before each other, their mutual radiance seemed to cast Sakura into shadow. She'd heard of this man from Haruka, the Hyuga woman who joined her party at Suna, and from numerous sources of gossip in the village. She'd been told that he had been running around with Naruto and Jiraiya for much of their time away, and had beaten some notorious brigand in lands far away. But she hadn't expected this man and Naruto to be on such friendly terms. They regarded each other like siblings, and Naruto had even called him brother. Yet, they'd only known each other for about a year, maybe two, by Sakura's estimate. And something about those sunglasses, he looked the type who she would have been suspicious of. Her thoughts were interrupted by Keisuke. "So, who's your girlfriend there, Naruto?" Sakura was about to protest, but was cut short by Naruto's mirthful laughter. "She's not my girlfriend, Keisuke," he said. "That's my teammate that I told you about, Haruno Sakura." Sakura, once she recovered from the still fresh surprise at Naruto's new attitude towards her, held her hand out for Keisuke to shake. He took it, a big grin present on his mien. His grip was firm, but not crushing, as Naruto's might have been, and within a second, Sakura felt it slacken a little, adjusting to match the strength of her own. "Of course, the kid's told me countless stories," he said. "You can tell he's got his heart in the right place. I almost thought he'd never cease telling me how great things were back in the days of old Team 7. It was annoying, sometimes, but it shows he cares for his teammates, which is more than I can say of many ninja I've met. He told me extensively about you. I'm honored to make your acquaintance, Sakura-san." Sakura was charmed. He may be a suspicious-looking kind of guy, but he certainly was nice. "Oh, the honor is mine, Keisuke-san," she said. "Anybody who can put up with a guy as obnoxious as Naruto for 3 years deserves my respect." The latter sentence produced the reaction she'd expected. "Hey," Naruto complained, "I can't have been all that terrible. I mean, I know I was immature, but you were." The reply came from both Keisuke and Sakura simultaneously, both of whom had had their share of the 12 and 13-year-old Naruto. Exasperated, Naruto grumbled, "Geez, I'm not that bad anymore." "That's for sure, kid," said Keisuke. "You're head and shoulders above where you were previously. Figuratively and literally." Naruto brightened a little, stretching up to his full, and indeed, head and shoulders above that of his former self, height, while Sakura silently agreed. The introductions performed, Keisuke went on, "I can't show you around just yet, unfortunately. I still have to visit the Shinobi registration office, and then I have more things to do today." "Oh, yeah, your examination," Naruto exclaimed, his face bright with hope. Knowing what his little brother would be wanting next, he said, "Sorry, Naruto. The test is supposed to be just me and the examiner, to avoid outside interference and the possibility of injuring bystanders. You can't go to watch it." "Damn, I thought it would be that way." Naruto's face betrayed only a sliver of regret, though everyone present could guess what was going on in his head. He was already growing bored, and not only that, he was worried that he wasn't going to be ready to face the challenges ahead of him. Witnessing a high-level battle involving the other possessor of his unique power would help both problems. "Hey now," Keisuke said, "I'll tell you all about it later, when we practice, and I'm sure you can find something to do for the next few hours." His words trailed off as he appeared to sense something familiar across the street. Then he smiled widely. "Hey there, Hinata-san," he called, "how are you this afternoon?" Naruto and Sakura turned around and, sure enough, there was Hyuga Hinata on the other side of the street, several bags in her arms from the store she had just exited and sporting a deer in the headlights look in her pale eyes. "Ah, Keisuke-san, Sakura. Naruto-kun. Oi, Hinata," yelled the blonde. "What's up?" The warm smile upon Naruto's face did not escape